Broadcast the men from Simmons, cause Franklin knows anything goes.
From the news center outside the city of Chicago in the great Midwest, it's the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on The Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt. Here's our headlines. People are still drinking bleach and vomiting, along with other serious side effects. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration this week released an important health warning that everyone should heed. Drinking bleach is dangerous, potentially life-threatening, and you should not do it. The FDA says that the products have been hard to scrub out because of claims on social media where the drinks are promoted along with false health information. Most of the claims can be traced back to Jim Humble, founder and Archbishop of the Genesis II Church of Health and Healing, also known as the Church of Bleach. The warning may seem unnecessary, but guzzling bleach is an unfortunate and persistent problem. Unscrupulous sellers have sold miracle bleach elixirs for decades, claiming that they can cure everything from cancer to HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, flu, hair loss, and more. And some have promoted it to parents as a way to cure autism in children, prompting many allegations of child abuse. Source: Ars Technica. And an asteroid warning. A town-sized rock is heading for Earth. A potentially hazardous asteroid big enough to have global consequences is heading Earth's way with a close approach next year. The massive space rock known as 1998 OR2 is currently swinging around the sun and will be heading Earth's way next year. NASA estimates the object is between 1.8 and 4.1 kilometers wide, a size which could cause global devastation on Earth. The asteroid is set to swing close to Earth on April 29th of 2020, when it will be just 0.04 astronomical units from Earth. 1 astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the Sun, so coming within just 0.04 astronomical units is precariously close. With a maximum size of 4.1 kilometers, the asteroid could easily destroy a country the size of the United Kingdom. While next year's approach will be relatively close, 1998 OR2 will come even closer when it reaches its closest point in April 2079. At that point, the asteroid, which takes 3.7 years to complete a full orbit, will fly by Earth at a distance of 0.01 astronomical units. Scientists estimate that a life-threatening asteroid, such as the one that put an end to the reign of the dinosaur, would collide with Earth every 100 million years or so. Source: The Express UK. And that brings us to the time to put on your Stranger Than Fiction Fringe Fun Fact hat. The monster in Frankenstein was never actually named, although the monster itself proposed the name Adam. This has been the Stranger Than Fiction News on the Fringe FM. Again, I'm Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer.
Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS speed rescue.
Contact, nice to be in orbit. The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Broadcasting from a shack on a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. This is Lighting the Void. Once again, I'm Joe Root. Welcome. It is Wednesday night, August the 28th. Tonight, our guest, Dr. Andrew Gallimore, is with us, and we're going to discuss what may be going on in the realms of the mind as it pertains to the psychedelic state. We are here in this place again to discuss DMT. What are these entities and beings that people are communicating with? This strange geometry that seems to be happening, that these experiences are talking about, and why it's so profound. Is it just a coincidence that the planet has given us ample opportunity and abundance in nature as it pertains to this structure, dimethyltryptamine, and psilocybin and more? Could there be a far distant alien race? I don't know, trying to make contact with us in a different way. You know, we think about spaceships and meteors and fast radio bursts, and we're out there looking for all of these signals. But what if they figured out just how the mind and the brain functions? What if they knew something that we didn't, and they were tapping into us a different way? I have lots of questions for Dr. Andrew Gallimore coming up. This is going to be an interesting discussion. And this is different. This isn't just about the DMT experience. There's an actual theory behind this, so we're going to get into that just in a moment coming up. There is an event in Sedona. I want you guys to really sink this in. Like, if you're in the Sedona area, please stop by this event. It's the Transcendence event. It happens in September. I believe the date is the 28th. Our very own Suzanne Ross is going to be hosting this thing, and if you put in the code word on the website, LTV, you're going to get $25 off. And all you got to do is go to sci-spy.tv/events to sign up for that. This is going to be one of those times where you might actually have a transcendental experience. And if you've never had a transcendental experience and you've thought about it, I would suggest that you go to this event. Also, this show is brought to you by GetTheTea.com, AncientLifeOil.com, the best CBD oil on the planet, and PrepareWithAFringe.com. Something I haven't done in a minute that I want to do, and I want to give a shout out to our supporters. I usually do this by first name only, so I don't offend anybody or scare anybody, and it just works out that way. But I know who you are, right? So just a quick shout out to Mary, Lynn, Stephen, Travis, Ellen, Debbie, Joe, Barbara, Mary, James, Grimerica, Helankus, Larry, Patrick, Craig, Joseph, Blake, Amanda, Randolph, Samantha, Sharon, David. Thank you all so much for your support. If you can't support, please do so. We're at the end of the month, and we haven't quite reached our goals. So if you've always wanted to support, or if you've had a thought about it, now is the time. The donate button's there on the website. Also, head over to UFOseekers.com if, by chance, you care about taking a journalistic approach to the UFO field. At UFO Seekers on Twitter is where you give them a follow on Twitter. If you want to see their best creative endeavors, then you go to youtube.com/UFO Seekers, and their website is UFOseekers.com. You can also give them a call, which I highly suggest you do if you believe that you've had a UFO sighting, at 661-UFO-7889. Now, our guest, Dr. Andrew Gallimore, is a computational neurobiologist, pharmacologist, chemist, and writer who has been interested in the neural basis of psychedelic drug action for many years, and is the author of a number of articles and research papers on the powerful psychedelic drug, which is N-dimethyltryptamine, well, it's known as DMT, as well as the book Alien Information Theory, Psychedelic Drug Technologies, and The Cosmic Game, which was released April of 2019. Now, he recently collaborated with DMT pioneer Dr. Rick Strassman, author of DMT, the Spirit Molecule, to develop a pharmacokinetic model of DMT as the basis of a target-controlled intravenous infusion protocol for extended journeys in DMT space. So his current interests focus on DMT as a tool for gaining access to extra-dimensional realities and how this can be understood in the terms of neuroscience, of the neuroscience of information. Now, he currently lives and works in Japan, and if you want to go to a website tonight for reference, that is www.buildingalienworlds.com. You can also check out his book at buildingalienworlds.com/book.html. Follow him on Twitter at Alien Insect and Instagram at Alien Insect. I'm stoked about this one for sure, man. I can't wait to get in this conversation. Thank you, Dr. Gallimore, for coming on.
Thank you, Joe. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, I have so many questions about this, and obviously everybody's got so many questions about the DMT experience, right? It's like the biggest thing on everybody's mind. And you know what I think really triggered this whole thing big time here recently? And I know it's kind of cliche, but when Alex Jones went on Joe Rogan and started talking about the machine elves and what's going on behind the scenes, whether it's conspiracy theory or not, it did start making people think about some type of communication that was actually happening, not just a psychedelic experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, precisely. And I was one of the people watching that on YouTube, and I actually immediately I wrote an article about this, which is also on my website, because I think the most the knee-jerk response to that is to say, "Oh, it's just Alex Jones. He's ranting and talking, he's crazy." Right. But actually, I think one should always step back and actually take a more nuanced approach to these kind of things. And, personally, I do take seriously the idea that DMT does facilitate access to, freestanding orthogonal realities that are populated by sentient, intelligences, often superintelligences or hyperintelligences, as we might call them. And I do believe that DMT allows us to establish communication with them. So it's not a great leap to suggest that those shadowy arms of the government, of the intelligence agencies, don't also know this and haven't known this for a long time and have not, been exploiting this technology behind the scenes. So what Alex says might sound crazy on the surface, but when you analyze it, it's not so wild.
Right. And you know what's funny about that? When he said that, it's almost like when he said that last sentence about, aliens are communicating with us through DMT, to do whatever, and he stopped and held his hands up like a baby that just realized something, you know what I mean? And he's like, that's what happens when you get stoned. You turn into a baby sometimes, right?
Yeah.
He just held his hands up in silence, and he was like, everybody just got real quiet, and he's like, man, I think I could get killed for saying this stuff, because it was such a big epiphany to people. And it made me think, like, look at what all we have done to try to talk to aliens. We're doing things at SETI and ESETI, and we've got all these different technologies that we're trying to find alien life somewhere out there in the universe. And who would have thought, if it wasn't for Terence McKenna, I don't know if we would have ever looked inside the mind for this, ever.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Terence McKenna one of my favorite lines from Terence McKenna, he said that using radio waves to search for alien intelligence is as culture-bound an assumption as searching the galaxy for a good Italian restaurant. This idea that these aliens that are perhaps, many millions of years more advanced than us would still be communicating in such a kind of pitiful, using such a pitiful kind of technology is kind of absurd. And Terence McKenna certainly was very keen to point that out, as is his brother Dennis McKenna as well. And I think it's almost impossible for us to imagine what an intelligence that was 100 years more advanced than us might look like, let alone millions or billions of years more advanced than us, and perhaps an intelligence not of this universe. And so we really do have to consider that they are unimaginable and unreckonable, and that their technological prowess and cognitive abilities are something that we struggle to reckon with, and thus we can't restrict ourselves to these kind of parochial technologies that to us are so familiar and obvious, but might be ridiculously outdated to an intelligence that is many millions of years more advanced than us, and may well have shed its material body and may well no longer exist in this sort of condensed meat form that we currently inhabit.
Right, like maybe an advanced, and it's not entirely illogical, like you're saying, to think based on quantum physics and entanglement and what they're doing with photons now, to look way ahead and think, like you just said, well, maybe they did figure out that time and space was not that big of a limiter at all, that everything was inside the mind. That's where the portal was. And even in religion, you see that they tell us this, like the kingdom of heaven's inside you. They always give you these hints. There's just too many doorways pointing to this stuff, Yeah,
precisely, yes. And I think people are now starting to wake up. And with the advent of modern things like virtual reality technologies and artificial intelligences, we start to realize that an intelligence doesn't necessarily take the form of a meat-based being with a skull, and a skull and with kind of a gelatinous lump of matter inside. But actually, intelligence can take quite exotic forms that we would not even perhaps recognize as intelligence, and there's the kind of limits that we have in terms of spatial and temporal limits and limits to how we can communicate as humans may simply not apply, and it may be that they have indeed found a way to access us as much as we have discovered perhaps their message, their tool, perhaps their technology that has been perhaps implanted within our reality, and that we are, just now learning to, just discovered and are learning to use. We have to take these ideas seriously.
Now, to me, you're a computational neurobiologist, pharmacologist, and chemist. To me, it's almost like God put you here on this earth to look at this, right? This subject, to figure this out. Now, can you help me and my southern simple mind understand what computational neurobiology is?
Yeah, so neurobiology generally is the study of the brain. It's trying to understand how the brain works by looking at its structure and the way it behaves and all that kind of thing. And then computational neurobiology is using computational models and mathematical models to try to understand the brain. The problem with researching the brain, particularly if you're interested in how the brain works in a living brain, is it's such a complex system. You can't. It's not like if you had a car and you kind of took it apart and you could kind of work out what all the pieces did and how they functioned. The brain is immensely, exponentially more complex than that, and it's made from very, very small, highly interconnected subunits that are microscopic and connected together in bewilderingly kind of complex ways. Right. And so you can't just take it apart and look at it. You have to actually look at very small parts and kind of build theories, ideas about how they might work, and then you can model those on a computer to try to understand what actually might be going on. So it's using computers and mathematics to try and understand the brain.
Gotcha. Okay. Which is seems like a huge task to begin with. So you've got to be one of probably the most analytical people on the planet. Thank God for that, right? Thank God we've got you. I don't know.
Maybe.
Kind of off subject though. I read an article about, and I don't know if you know the truth about this or not, and I want to ask while I have you. They did some type of experiment that I read in this article where they cut the flesh of a brain and they separated the parts, the tissue, and saw that it was still transmitting signals without the tissue actually being connected. Is that true? Did you hear anything about that? Just a shot in the dark.
Well, I mean, I'm not quite sure exactly which the experiment you're talking about, but it's certainly true that the brain does operate as a unified kind of unit, but also you can also remove parts of the brain. You can even isolate single cells from the brain, and they display activity. That doesn't mean they're thinking or that they can do much, but yeah, you can certainly take apart a brain and chop it up, and each piece will exhibit some kind of activity. It doesn't kind of shut down completely. So yes, there could be some truth to that.
Yeah, I believe I'll find it later, but I believe the article was something about how it was still communicating with the other pieces, and I was like, "What? It's wireless too?" Okay,
I see. That's interesting. That would be very, very unusual. Yes.
Yeah.
If there's no physical connection. Yeah.
Well, you know how articles are, man. They get on the web and then they spread like a disease sometimes. You know, before you can figure out if they're true or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
So tell me, I'm assuming that you've partaken in this journey of DMT, though, right? I'm assuming I'm correct on that.
Well, I can neither confirm or deny that, Joe, but I think you probably assume.
All right. Okay, so what made you think about using computational neurobiology? Like, what triggered that? Say, man, I really need to put this on a grid, or look at protocols that are like, using a computer. What made you get into that?
Yeah, well, I didn't start that way, Joe. I mean, I didn't start as a neurobiologist. I mean, if my kind of career or description really should have started with chemistry and then moved into pharmacology. When I originally got interested in psychedelic drugs when I was a teenager, I was interested in the drugs themselves and, their chemistry and their structure. And I found that kind of fascinating, and thinking about how they kind of interface with the human body and with the brain. But that's only half the picture. I mean, one has to also understand what the brain itself in order to understand how a drug can affect the brain. So the kind of the neurobiology part of my academic career has been in the last sort of 10 years, so to speak, whereas the first half was much more sort of low level chemistry and pharmacology. Gotcha. Yeah. But I think the computational side, if you really want to explore novel hypotheses about what the brain is doing and psychedelics, it's very difficult to do that in humans. You can't. Very difficult to manipulate the brains of humans, real living human beings, for ethical reasons, obviously. And it's also extremely complex. And animals, well, I'm not really particularly interested in animal research in psychedelics because an animal can't tell you whether it's tripping or not. It can shake its head, it can run around in circles or whatever, but it can't tell you that it's tripping. So for me, the two most important fields in neuroscience currently in terms of psychedelic drugs is the neuroimaging work. So looking at the activity of the brain. What is the brain doing when a psychedelic drug is present, and how does that relate to the subjective experience of the user? And on the other hand, there's the computational side of actually building models to try and replicate and model what these things are doing. And they kind of complement each other. I sit on the computational side, so I don't actually have to work with humans. But there are some really outstanding teams now, particularly the Imperial College London team, who are really pioneers at looking at what is happening to the brain, how the activity of the brain is changing when a psychedelic drug is administered.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm with you so far on that. Now, when you hear people talk about machine elves, so there's a few things. I've went on some YouTube binges, right? I think all of us have done that. Specifically, YouTube binges on listening to people talk about what they saw in this experience. And what I found most interesting were two things I heard were machine elves or some machine elvish like creatures. And the other one was some type of framework where they could see people talking, or they could see or hear people speaking around them. I even had one incident where I was watching another guy talked about how there was a cross. He could see like the cross of reality or something, and there were figures moving behind it talking like he was about to wake up or something. And so I wonder, do you think that this is a threshold, or this is more like and this is just theory, obviously, more like a system of communication?
What do you mean by a threshold?
Well, you hear people talking about breakthrough experiences. Now, I've never done this, right? But I've listened to Terrence McKenna and obviously everyone else talk about it. And it seems like that in my mind, there's a threshold there, almost as if we're about to really wake up for real, but our brain is still filtering some type of geometrical patterns in the construct of what we call reality. And if it wasn't for the fact that we were attached to this body, we would go ahead and just go on, right? Does that sound...
Right. Well, I mean, it's possible. There are many interpretations of what's going on. I think that the problem really in trying to get a grip on the DMT state is that people often have poorly framed questions about it. I'm not talking about your questions.
No. I'm sure mine are poorly framed as well. I've never done it, you know.
But no, it's serious. I mean, people will say to me, "Oh, is it real or is it not real? Or are these entities, these machinelles, are they real or not?" And people don't. If I ask them, what do you mean by real? They often struggle to give me an answer. And so this is a problem. It's like, what do we mean by real versus unreal? And so what I think I brought to this discussion is to actually try and frame these questions from a neuroscientific perspective and think about, what is, first of all, if you're going to answer questions about the DMT world and the beings within it, you first have to understand the normal kind of what we would call the waking consensus world, the world we ordinarily experience. If you don't understand that and what that's about and how that is constructed by the brain, then you've got no chance of getting to grips with the DMT experience. So I always start from there. I've always asked from the beginning, how does the brain build your world? Because you always live from the moment you're dragged from the womb until you take your last breath. You are, and perhaps beyond, you are immersed within a world, and this is what we generally refer to as a phenomenal world, a subjective world. Right. This is the only world you will ever know. However, that world will differ depending upon different circumstances. When you're awake, your brain is basically constructing a model of the environment, which it is then testing against sensory information. So your brain is constantly kind of building a model of what it thinks should be correct, and then it's testing it, making small predictions about what should happen next. And then it will change its model if it gets things wrong. And that's going on all the time. So the brain is constantly in conversation, if you like, with the environment. But always the world that you experience is still constructed entirely by the brain. And that applies whether you are waking, but it also applies when you dream at night. So when you dream, you descend into a world that is more often than not, or very, very similar to the waking world, because it's constructed by the brain in exactly the same way. The difference, however, is that the brain no longer is able to have this conversation with the environment. The information from the environment is cut off. And so the brain has to kind of construct the model without reference to information, without the constraint and modulation of sensory information, which is why the dream world tends to be very similar to the waking world, but seems to be slightly less predictable. It seems to be less stable. It seems to shift from scene to scene and things like that, and can become quite bizarre. And then we can apply that to the DMT world. The DMT world is also constructed by your brain as a model of, and this is the interesting question, is the brain constructing this model of the DMT world purely without any access to any information from an environment, or is it constructing this DMT world using information from some other place, i.e. what would be this other reality? And to me, that's a much better question. Is the DMT world kind of like a different type of dream world that's disconnected from all sensory information? In other words, the brain's just making it up all by itself, or is it more like a waking world, but a different waking world where the brain is constructing the world but using information from some other reality? That's a much more well-defined question than simply saying, is it real or not real? Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So what's its reference, so to speak, for creating what you're experiencing?
Exactly. And that's the key point, because it's very simple to say it's just hallucination, your brain's just making it up. But actually, your brain is not that good at just making up worlds, or at least it shouldn't be. Your brain has learned to construct your normal kind of waking world over really millions of years of evolution. It takes a long time for a brain to learn to construct a stable model of the environment in such rich detail. You just look around you now, just think of all of that information that your brain is generating from moment to moment. It's incredible. The idea then that when you take a drug, the brain suddenly is able to construct this bizarre, hyper-technological alien environment that has no relationship to the normal waking world. I always say it's kind of like somebody who only speaks English suddenly switching into speaking fluent Siberian Yupik, speaking some completely alien language, or Japanese or Chinese. You would say that's impossible. They never learned to speak that language. Well, it's kind of the same. The brain shouldn't really know how to construct these bizarre realities that seem to have commonalities, so many commonalities between users. Many users seem to go to the same place. How did the brain learn to construct that? Unless the brain is actually receiving some information. There is some reference, some other true reality within which these intelligences reside.
And so is this kind of where you start to look at things in your book? Is that where you start to present certain things that are being presented to us to where we can try to figure this out?
Well, I wrote the first paper I wrote on this topic is to actually analyze that assumption about that it's just hallucination and say, does it hold water? And I came to the conclusion that actually it's very difficult to simply dismiss the DMT state as simply hallucination, because neuroscientifically, from what we know about how the brain works and how the brain constructs our reality, it seems untenable that the brain can suddenly start constructing these realities. So this is when I first started taking the DMT state seriously as a place that is actually there, wherever it is, and that the beings that we meet do actually possess subjectivity. They are actually conscious, intelligent beings that we can communicate with. And so the book is really about trying to put that all together into a coherent narrative. Where did DMT come from? Where did our world come from? What is the relationship between our normal kind of three-dimensional plus time world and this bizarre hyperdimensional world to which DMT seems to gain access? Can we bring it all together into a model of reality and a model of the brain and a model of DMT that actually explains where we came from, where we are now, and perhaps where we're going?
Wow. And who doesn't want to read a book about that? I do. Yes, please. Psychedelic
Everybody
drug.
should, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Psychedelic Drug Technologies and the Cosmic Game. That's the book. It's out on Amazon right now. A very good price for the hardcover, actually. We'll be right back with Dr. Andrew Gallimore.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
And now we can get the information.
I love magic, and on Lighting the Void, each and every week, you will get to hear shows about magic, mysticism, and many other subjects that stretch your mind and imagination. So when I got my mind on the magic and the magic on my mind, I listened to Lighting the Void on the Fringe FM. It's magic.
May the gods look with favor upon you.
You're wondering what we're going to do to you, aren't you?
This is Corbin, son of the one and only Joe Roop, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Hi, this is Kronox from Belgium, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? CannaSense is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. CannaSense does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the cost, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will supplant recreational perceptions, and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and CannaSense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today.
Come, walk through the mossy creek and up the hill. Never mind the flashing lights and otherworldly shadows. They stay hidden within the trees. Come, step up to the shack and begin your journey to the answers that you seek. This is Lady Anne, and you are listening to Lighting the Void on the Fringe FM.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied, but you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with, you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Alex Exum. This is Alex Exum of the Exum Experience in Live Talk, where we discuss current events, society, and culture. My shows are based in actuality, actual existence, contrasted with what was intended, expected, or believed. You can listen to me live Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 7 p.m. only on KTLK, The Fringe FM.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to The Fringe FM, and visit the website, thefringe.fm, to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on The Fringe FM.
You're listening to Lighting the Void. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. If you would like to text, you can text in at 501-777-5631.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. Tonight we're speaking with Dr. Andrew Gallimore, and we're discussing his book, Psychedelic Drug Technologies and the Cosmic Game, and a computational neurobiologist is what he is now, as well as a pharmacologist and chemist. He's also done some presentations. You can find them on YouTube as well. All you got to do is really go to YouTube and just search Andrew Gallimore. And if you go to buildingalienworlds.com, that is the website for reference. There's a blog there and some writings as well. You know, I get what you're saying about the asking the right questions. You know, I'm a big fan of asking the right questions when it comes to all of the stuff that we talk about. But one thing that I'm curious about, and I know that you've noticed, is there is a definite cause and effect with people that do this. For the most part, it seems like everyone that's ever had this experience has some type of an awakening, or they become more aware, or they start to look at things differently. They become more open-minded. to me, that smells highly of, okay, something put this here on purpose.
Yes, and I think you're absolutely right. There's the experience, particularly the first time, is shattering. I use that word deliberately. It really does shatter any concept. You go into the experience perhaps with your own model, your own version of what you think the world is, and DMT shatters it and kind of throws it back in your face and says, have I got news for you, so to speak, as Terence McKenna used to say. It's a soul-shattering experience that destroys all of your reference points instantaneously and replaces them with something that simply cannot be imagined and could never have been imagined by you prior going into that state. And that is shocking. It's a shocking experience. It uproots the foundations of all of your kind of ontological assumptions are uprooted. There's a number of ways to express this, but I hope I'm making myself clear. This is really something extraordinary. It's impossible. It's you are experiencing the impossible, and so it really doesn't surprise me whether you are an atheist or a Catholic or a Hindu or Muslim. When you go into that, you come out with a completely fresh idea of what is possible and what reality truly is, and it's very difficult to go back. I think, and for many people, they say, okay, that's it. I never want to go there again. That was just too much. I want to forget it. And the brain will kind of do the job for you. It tends to, whether it's repressing it or whether it struggles to form memories of the experience. One of the frustrating things about DMT is that it's very difficult to remember details unless you're very, very experienced with it. And so people will often come out of the state and go, oh my God, what was that? And they're ranting and raving, and then 2 minutes later they kind of forgotten what happened. So it's paradoxical in that it is earth-shattering, and yet often you will kind of forget what was so earth-shattering about it a few minutes later, and then for some people that's enough. Whereas for some people, other people who are a bit more intrepid, that's another reason to go back. Say, oh my God, what the hell was that? I need to go back again and see that again, because I really cannot believe what just happened to my mind and what just happened to my reality. So truly an awakening experience.
Now, as it relates to things to like LSD, psilocybin, peyote, this is what you're saying is this experience is it's something different. Is it totally different in your opinion?
Well, yes. I mean, there are qualitative and quantitative differences. So qualitatively, so in other words, the type of experience, what is the content like? What is the structure of the experience? DMT does seem to be unique. However, with very high doses of psilocybin mushrooms, for example, and psilocybin actually is very closely related to DMT structurally. The active compound in magic mushrooms, psilocybin, is converted to a chemical called psilocin in the body, and this is only one oxygen atom away from DMT. And some people say that very, very extremely high doses of mushroom are almost indistinguishable from DMT. But what separates DMT out is the ease with which you can enter this space. You need sort of 30 milligrams, which is a good lungful or two will do it, and you're gone. It's extremely difficult to get to that kind of level with magic mushrooms because it's extremely difficult to consume that many magic mushrooms to enter that space. Whereas with DMT, it's simple. It's extremely simple. It's an extremely democratic drug. Pretty much anybody who can watch a couple of YouTube videos could make DMT. It's not difficult. It's everywhere. It's in countless plant species scattered across the globe. If you open your window now and look outside in your garden, there are probably a handful of species that contain some level of DMT. Nature is drenched in DMT, as Dennis McKenna likes to say. So DMT is special in that way. It's special in many other ways as well, but particularly the ubiquity of DMT and the ease with which one can use it to actually burst through into these realms that are, unimaginable. I mean, it's astonishing, really, that such a common and simple compound that is basically present everywhere you look holds the keys. It really does hold the keys to exiting this universe entirely, and that is astonishing.
Interesting. You say exiting the universe. If you would have told me that 10 years ago, to be like, this guy's out of his mind, right? But if you listen to enough McKenna, right? This guy's McKenna was no dummy. He studied lots of things, and instead of him saying, heaven, going to heaven after you die is the precipice of experience or relationships or love, he pointed directly at DMT and said that this is where the answers are. This is the biggest thing that we need to be looking at. This is going to change things. And for somebody as smart as he is to say that, that's what really got my attention,
Yeah. I mean, Terence McKenna used to say, DMT is not a secret. It is the secret. He was convinced, as am I. I was semi-convinced before I'd even hypothetically taken DMT, right? After that event, I knew basically that this was something, that this was it. I kind of found the philosopher's stone. This was the secret. This was the key, and that it must be studied, and that I must, pick up the mantle, so to speak, and actually try to work out or do my best, at least, to kind of point in the right direction of trying to understand what this is. What is this technology that's embedded in our reality? How can we employ it as a technology? I think that it's incumbent upon us to not just take DMT for granted and use it as kind of a toy to kind of burst into this kind of space and then kind of exit 5 minutes later. I think if we do take this DMT space seriously, which I do, and take seriously the idea that these entities are conscious and that they do want to communicate, and that we have the opportunity for extended two-way communication, which in my opinion would be the most remarkable discovery in the history of the human race by some margin, then we should take the DMT as a tool seriously, and we should think about, how do we use it? What is the way to employ this technology towards that aim? And it ain't sitting on a rug and smoking it in a little glass pipe. That's efficient but rather primitive and basic technology. It's the horse-drawn cart, whereas we should be thinking towards the rocket ship, so to speak. We should be thinking about, what really is the best way. How can we use our technologies, the technologies that we have here on Earth, that we have developed as an intelligent species of some merit, how can we actually bring those to the table with in the employment of DMT as this technology for establishing communication with these vast numbers of extremely highly developed and very old intelligences.
Yeah, and I mean, come on, let's look at ancient Egypt and Sumeria, all of the symbolism they used with the pine cones and pineal. It's in everything. It's even in the Bible. I think in where Jacob was wrestling with the angel, and he said, "I'll call the place Peniel, which is the face of God," or "I've seen the face of God." It's just in everything, and it makes me think. To me, at first, I got to be honest with you, Andrew. At first, I got kind of disappointed. I'm like, really? Is this what everything has been talking about spiritually? Is a substance that we take or that we can ingest, or this is what the ultimate spiritual experience is about? And it made me feel disappointed, but I could not stop looking at the facts of all of these coincidences lining up in symbolism and metaphor and history. And so after listening to everybody's stories, it does make me wonder if we're not being guided by something in a way that's putting this in nature, almost like either knowing that we're going to come in contact with it soon enough, or maybe they're hoping that we do, and that's the whole plan. I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, precisely. And this is something that I discuss at length in the book, is the idea that DMT is kind of a message that's embedded in the reality, but a message that could only be read, decoded, and understood by an intelligent species. more almost like an intelligence test, if you like. If you think about DMT, it is everywhere. True, it's in countless plant species as well as animal species as well, and yet the intelligence required to actually identify it as this tool, to actually isolate it and purify it, and then learn how to use it. That's not something that a being with chimpanzee levels of intelligence could ever even hope to achieve. This requires highly sophisticated technological and sophistication and cognitive acumen to do that. And so it's a message which is everywhere, and yet only the most evolved intelligent species would ever be able to identify the message as the message, and then to actually decode it and use it. And this is the kind of stage we're at now within this kind of cosmic game, as I refer to it in the book. Is we're at the stage we've just discovered the technology. Back in the 1950s, Stephen Zara, this Hungarian chemist, discovered that DMT was this hallucinogen, this psychotomimetic, they called it in those days. And now we're learning what DMT means and how it works, and that it may actually be this tool for communicating with alien intelligences. And we sort of starting to realize now that, we have to treat it as a technology and learn how to actually use the technology. So that's the stage we're at. We're certainly not near the end game as such. We're just kind of at the beginning of perhaps the final chapter.
When you hear people talk about, because there's a lot of, I've come across naysayers too. So they talk about, well, these are just glorified drug users, which to me, I'm like, wow. I mean, okay, I don't even want to have a conversation going down that road. But then the one thing that does get my attention though, is when people say, well, you can do this naturally. You don't need to ingest anything. You don't need to take it intravenously. If you learn the proper techniques that are taught in some mystery schools or whatever, you could learn this naturally, and it's actually more safe and all of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, a lot of people say that. A lot of people that do say that, and I hear that a lot as well, are people that never taken DMT. So they kind of have this vague kind of fuzzy idea of what the DMT state is. Perhaps they imagine that when you smoke DMT, you just kind of see bright colors or see kind of geometric shapes, the kind of thing you might achieve in a meditative state, for example, using certain types of breathing techniques. However, if that's the case, these people are way off the mark. It's impossible for someone, if it was somebody who'd actually smoked DMT and they said, I can achieve it without using DMT, I would be extremely surprised, and I'd be very interested in them actually demonstrating this in some way. Perhaps, using their blood sampling data to actually say, can we detect any changes in their chemistry, in their physiology that would indicate they are actually having a DMT type experience? But I'm certainly not convinced. Some people are very angry at me for saying that. There's a handful of people that really are convinced that you can breathe your way to the DMT state, and perhaps it is possible, but I am not. I'm not in the camp that takes that idea as being something that is definitively the case. I think by far the most reliable way, and a completely safe way, by the way, of achieving this state is to ingest DMT. It is not a harmful molecule. It is completely innocuous as far as we know. It has no negative effects on your physiology, right, either external or internal to the brain. So, I'm not convinced that breathing is going to do it.
Yeah, like Terrence McKenna used to say, you're not going to have a hangover or a withdrawals or cocaine binges and stuff like it. Just comes in naturally and goes out naturally, which I also find fascinating. But all of this talk still just makes me so more anxious, because I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't care what the law says. Like, I want to do this. I want to have this experience. If I do, though, I do worry about the dangers of this. And when I talk about the dangers, obviously, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if there's been any cases of people that OD'd on this stuff. I don't know. You hear mixed stories, but are there any real dangers to this, in your opinion? I'm not saying that you're promoting it or whatever, but what is the most dangerous thing about this experience, you think?
Well, I mean, Terence McKenna used to say that the only danger is death by astonishment. And,
right.
You know, and that was a little quip. But actually, I think it's, in terms of the physiology, there's nothing physiologically that would concern me about DMT, unless you had some kind of underlying condition. You know, the same kind of medical condition that would preclude you from going on a roller coaster, right? If they stop you and say, hey, you can't go on the roller coaster, you have a heart condition, or you have, you know, very high blood pressure, or these kind of things that would make a traumatic experience potentially dangerous, then DMT is dangerous. But of course, it's not the drug that's doing that. You know, going on a roller coaster at Disney World or something, that would perhaps do the same thing. So in terms of toxicity and direct toxic effects of the drug, they don't exist. So that seems to be the case. Now, so the dangers seem to be, if you're a completely healthy person, seem to be really the psychological. You know, are you ready for this experience? Are you ready to be shown something that is going to astonish you in ways that you could never possibly imagine? So I think it's not something that should be taken lightly. Just because it's safe physiologically doesn't mean that you should go in there and, you know, rub your hands together and go, great, let's go. These are very bizarre realms that are populated with a diverse range of intelligent beings that vary as much in their character as their intent. So, you know, it's not all sweetness and light in that. You're not just going to meet fairy godmothers and, you know, amorphous beings of light that kind of cradle you in their arms. You will likely meet those kind of beings, but you're also going to meet some beings that are quite menacing, perhaps, that have visually objectionable in some way, or that seem to have some kind of malicious intent. That doesn't mean they can actually harm you, but they will certainly frighten you and might take great pleasure in making you think that they kind of have some kind of power over you and that they can harm you. So, you know, one has to be prepared that kind of thing can happen. You know, don't take it lightly. It is a hell of a drug.
Well, I'm asking you a lot of these same questions a lot of people get, only because of your background. That's all. I know you get these questions a lot. And I apologize if you're like, okay, this question again. But, you know, for people like me that have never done it, when someone like you comes along with the education that you've had, I know I'm going to get a real answer, right? I know I'm going to get a straight answer from you about it. So I appreciate that. The thing about it is I think we all want to think that we are communicating with something other than ourselves. Now, in everything that I have studied when it comes to like mystery schools, Western, Eastern, Carl Jung, the out-of-body experience, there's this idea that all of these characters and entities and things that you meet in these realms are just parts of yourselves, even when it comes to things like demonic invocation, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Is this experience something where you are pretty sure that we are communicating with something that is not ourselves, possibly? Something that's not attached to us, I don't know, in the mind, so to speak. Well, that's kind of a bad question, but you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean, and I think it's difficult because, well, I mean, I think the idea that these beings perhaps are fragments of one's psyche, in a kind of Jungian sense, Carl Jung's idea that the psyche can fragment and form these complexes, these autonomous complexes, he used to call them, that may or may not be conscious and can appear to act entirely independent of us. That's a possibility. What I struggle with using that kind of model is that these beings seem to have a level of intelligence that seems to be orders of magnitude greater than any human, and they seem totally alien. They seem not just non-human as such, but universe, non-this universe. They don't seem like alien beings from another planet. They seem like intelligences from a completely different type of reality. And so trying to fit that in to a model that, this is just part of ourselves, I struggle a bit. I don't dismiss it. I think it's a very worthy kind of idea. And Terence McKenna also discussed this a lot as well, and he felt that the elves perhaps were these little mischievous trickster complexes that Jung liked to write about. And these are good, cool ideas, but I think we shouldn't assume that that's the case. And I think we have to take the idea seriously that they are actually completely separate, or as separate as conscious beings are. There is an argument to say that separateness of intelligence is itself a kind of an illusion. We're all kind of different points of view, different perspectives of the same kind of underlying fundamental consciousness. This is the Vedic, the kind of the ancient kind of Hindu position that actually there's only one self. There's only one fundamental self, but that it has different perspectives and appears to be many different things. I kind of lean towards that perspective. So I don't think that these beings being part of ourselves and being separate beings I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think they're just perhaps slightly different ways of thinking about the same thing, which only clouds it, I'm afraid. It doesn't really answer your question, but it means that, the reality is never black and white, is it? It's always kind of grey, and I think that probably applies with these entities as well, is that they're partly us and partly not us, and somewhere in between, kind of Schrodinger's cat kind of situation, perhaps.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting answer. Yeah. That's what I'm curious about, is that alone. Look, we're already at the top of the hour. I want to get into more of your work specifically and how you're going about this, especially when it comes to your book. If you guys have any questions, I did open up the phone lines. If you want to call in, ask any questions, it's 1-800-588-0335. You can also call in at 501-424-5130 or use the Discord chat. And if you get in there, just hang tight. I'll get right to you. All right, we'll be right back.
To call Joe, pick up the phone, dial 1-800-588-0335, toll free from the United States or Canada.
And you are listening to The Fringe FM.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Listen, I want to tell you about G.I. Joy from GetTheTea.com. It's the best alchemical concoction of goodies for your stomach and digestive system I can recommend, and that's all based on my experience. Packed with colostrum, acidophilus, aloe, peppermint, and turmeric. If you do your own research, then you know this is the bee's knees for the stomach and digestion. Now, due to Big Brother's ears and the eye in the sky, I can't go into the details about what it helped me with. All I can say is I got relief. It's non-GMO, no fillers, no preservatives, manufactured right here in the US of A, and delivered to you by the only people who stay on top of the game and are out in front. Go grab a bottle of G.I. Joy at GetTheTea.com and see what all the fuss is about. Again, that's GetTheTea.com.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
The Fringe FM isn't just a radio station. We also provide services for all your audio production needs. If you are interested in live radio or pre-recorded podcasts, we're here to help. We even do audio enhancements and voiceovers if needed. If you want to do a podcast or live radio show and even want the option to syndicate on terrestrial radio, from simple audio file enhancement to live production and call screening, we have you covered. We have worked with some of the best professionals in the business in order to provide coaching instruction for content creation, show structure, and more. Contact The Fringe Digital Media for more at info@thefringe.fm. That's info@thefringe.fm. Or call 501-777-5631 for a consultation.
This portion of the show is being brought to you by Bluto's Zen Buddhist Mantra Center and Discreet Loan Shark Service, your one-stop shop for high-interest lending and eternal cosmic enlightenment. Remember our motto, we can't show you the sound of one hand clapping, but if you don't pay off your loan in time, we will introduce you to the sound of two kneecaps disintegrating.
Every Saturday at midnight here on The Fringe FM. You can join me, Stephen Canby, the host of The Midnight Hour Show. On my show, we explore paranormal topics with a skeptical view. We search for evidence. We search for proof. We search for the truth. Because who better than me, my friends, a magician, a man trained in the art of deception and misdirection? Who better than me to investigate for you some of the greatest mysteries on planet Earth? And I hope you will join me every Saturday night here on The Fringe FM at midnight Eastern Standard Time for the Midnight Hour Show, 9 p.m. Pacific. I want you to join me here every Saturday night at midnight for an incredible journey. Consider yourself invited. Brand new episodes of The Midnight Hour Show, available exclusively every Saturday night here on The Fringe FM. Consider yourself invited.
Join us on
Hey Google, I would like to become more intelligent about the unknown world around us, but I don't have time to read or go to school because I work all the time. What do you recommend?
Try listening to Lighting the Void. It's the best way to become more intelligent about the unknown world around us. Besides, I happen to think Joe Roop is the most handsome voice in radio. Listen Monday through Friday 9 p.m. till midnight Pacific time on The Fringe FM. Plus, you will hear a bonus feature called The Stranger Than Fiction News, reported by Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer. With all this information in one location, you are guaranteed to be more attractive to others in your social circle because you'll beam with intellectual wisdom.
Yeah, I think I'll try that.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. We're here with Dr. Andrew Gallimore. We're talking about his book, Alien Information Theory, Psychedelic Drug Technologies, and the Cosmic Game. A little bit different subject. Still talking about DMT, but we're looking at it in a different way. And in a different way, I mean, we're talking about DMT and computational neurobiology here, which now that I understand what that is, we're about to dive into that, a little bit more into that, and hopefully we can get a better understanding of Dr. Gallimore's work. But first, I want to go ahead, and I would love to take this phone call, 619 area code. You are on the air with Dr. Andrew Gallimore. Who are we speaking with?
Howdy, my name is Henry.
Henry,
Hey,
what's on your mind?
Hey, good, hello. Hey, so I'm more of a skeptic more than anything. Or I was, at least in the last few years, but I've been studying it for a long time. And I was just wondering if the guest, if he has any, direct information about the regions of the brain. I only asked because one time, on my biggest experience when I was done with it, I could feel my pineal gland in my skull for like a good 15 minutes. And part of it, when you say about risk, the whole thing about Terence McKenna, how he ended up with brain cancer, that is a big risk. That is something that freaked me out, actually, multiple times. That's why I'm a little bit leery of going into it or, advising it, because he ended up that way. But that was rare, but you know how he was quite a head, if you said.
So what is
anything about...
What your specific question is about the dangers as it relates to brain cancer?
Well, I mean, one thing, if he knows about anything about its direct, action on certain specific regions of the brain, if there's, I'm sure he studied.
Okay.
Besides just, the mythology of the pineal gland, is there any truth to it? And also, is there any truth to, do you think there's any danger associated with, long-term?
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. I'll have to let that call go because there's quite a bit of background noise. I don't know what that is, but thank you for your question. Very, very good question. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Doc?
Yeah, there's a few points there. So, I mean, in terms of, we do understand so all drugs, when they, most drugs anyway, certainly psychoactive drugs that affect the brain and consciousness, when they enter the brain, they tend to bind to specific very small proteins called receptors, and these are what's responsible for their effects. And we understand that to quite a good, high level of detail. We know what DMT is doing. We know what it's binding to, and we know basically the effects it's having in the brain. How that then relates to, the bizarre worlds that you're catapulted into is a different question. But there's no great mystery surrounding what DMT is actually doing in the brain. So that's which it's not acting. It's acting on certain parts of the brain, areas of the outer layer of the brain called the cortex, which is responsible for constructing your model of reality, basically. So it's interacting with that part of the brain. So that's kind of the first part of the question. In terms of the pineal, this pineal thing, this fascination or that people have had with the pineal for a long time, I don't see it as being significant. It holds. There's a great lot of mythology surrounding the pineal, and this is why I get a lot of pushback when I say I'm not really that interested in the pineal, because they're wedded to the idea that the pineal is of great importance in terms of DMT. Now, the pineal might be really important for other reasons that I'm not aware of, but in terms of producing DMT, which is really all I can speak about, I can't speak about whether the pineal is allowing the soul to exit the body or something like that. What I can say is that we know the pineal is really not up to the job when it comes to secreting or producing DMT. So if people think that the role of the pineal is to produce DMT, it's highly unlikely. The pineal is simply too small to produce sufficient quantities of DMT that would allow one to have a kind of breakthrough DMT experience. So yeah, and also there's a very recent study that in rats admittedly, but they did find DMT in the brain of these rats, and it was independent of whether or not the rats had a pineal. So they actually were able to cut the pineal out, and there was no effect on the DMT production in the brain. And also in humans, people who have pineal tumors, often have their pineal completely removed, and it doesn't seem to affect. It basically affects sleep in that their sleep-wake cycle is disrupted. They might suffer from insomnia, but that's expected because the pineal produces melatonin, which is important for regulating the sleep-wake cycle. But they don't have any effects on dreams or any other kind of psychological effects, which you would expect if the pineal is such an important organ in sort of consciousness and that kind of thing. So pineal. Probably not. In terms of Terence McKenna's brain cancer, it almost certainly had absolutely nothing to do with his DMT use. There's no evidence whatsoever that DMT is carcinogenic or has any kind of mutational effect on brain cells. So it almost certainly wasn't. I mean, Terence McKenna, he wasn't one of these people who smoked DMT every day. I mean, he probably in his life smoked it 40, 50 times, something like that. He discussed it a lot, but he wasn't addicted, or he wasn't kind of a daily user of DMT by any stretch of the imagination. Terence McKenna's brain cancer was glioblastoma multiforme, which happens to be the most common and unfortunately the most aggressive and dangerous type of brain cancer. So he was just very unlucky. It almost certainly had nothing to do with any of his drug use.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a guy like Dick Kahn, I'm sure. As far as competitions go, I don't know who's done more than what, and we know Terrence. His motto was like, "Take it, try it," So I'm sure there were other things involved in his life other than DMT, but
for sure.
It's a good question. It's things we worry about, like how is it going to affect our brain? Is it going to cause the overgrowth of cells in our brain activity, stuff like that?
It's a reasonable question, but and it's a question that Terence McKenna himself asked. He asked his doctor, and he says, "Hey doc, is it the drugs?" And the doc said, "No, it's almost certainly got nothing to do with the drugs. You just happen to be one of these unfortunate people that gets struck by this." In terms of brain cancer, it's a relatively common type of fatal brain cancer.
Now, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but you said you don't find the pineal gland that important in all this, right? Did I get you wrong there on that?
Well, in terms of DMT, I mean, the pineal gland is drenched in mysticism and mythology and all this kind of stuff. None of which I can comment on. All I can comment on is the kind of the neuroscientific aspects of the pineal. What do people say is the relationship between the pineal and DMT? And for a long time, people have said that the pineal produces DMT, perhaps during the dream state, which I don't believe. I don't think there's any evidence for that. I don't think it stands up to scrutiny. And perhaps at the point of death, the pineal produces large quantities of DMT. And now, if that was the case, the pineal would have to be much larger, because the pineal is producing nanograms, micrograms of melatonin every night. These are very, very small amounts, whereas it would have to start producing perhaps 1,000 times more in terms of quantity to achieve a kind of a level of DMT in the brain where it would actually have any psychological effect. So it's just not possible that the pineal is responsible for massive DMT production in the brain. So that's as much as I can say. I can say that the pineal is probably not involved in DMT production. I can't go any further.
I respect that. I totally respect that. Love the honesty about it. Because, honestly, if I'm being honest about it, I assume all this based on what people say because, you're all good researchers, right? And to me, somebody in your field's obviously done your research on it. So that's perfectly fine with me to know that, hey, maybe we all need to look at this a little bit more before we just assume that everything is coming from the pineal gland all the time.
Exactly.
Look at the research, maybe. There's probably a massive amount of papers written on it. Okay. So with that being said, when people have an encounter, and I talked to Whitley Strieber about this and other people that have had encounters with grays and such, they've always been in some type of, for the most part, different state of consciousness, whether they're falling asleep, meditating, not sure, there's loss of time, things like that. So do you think that the DMT experience is directly related to those type of events when people have encounters, perhaps more than an actual spaceship, coming through the wall in somebody's bedroom, so to speak, without even thinking about what reality really is, just the fact that they're in a different state of consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, I have thought about this a lot, and it's certainly, as have many people actually, because there seems to be this. Many people do describe seeing kind of alien-type beings on DMT, and they do describe having things done to them, like operations, being on a table and entities surrounding them and performing operations on them, which certainly has parallels with these kind of alien abduction experiences. And one has to question whether these aliens, these highly advanced aliens, really are traveling from the further reaches of the universe to come into your bedroom at night, or whether they are perhaps using some other kind of technology to access you, which might be might involve interfacing with your brain in some way. Whether that means elevating DMT in your brain, or whether it's simply a similar kind of technology whereby they can change your brain activity and thus allow them to kind of access your consciousness. That is what I've thought about quite a lot, because I'm not convinced that if you necessarily someone who was having an abduction experience, if you were in the room with them, that they wouldn't be just be laid there, apparently asleep. I think that is possible as well. I don't think one necessarily has to invoke physical beings entering one's room, but that they could indeed be using some kind of technology to enter our consciousness without having to actually, come here, physically, so to speak. Does that involve DMT? I don't know. There are a number of characteristics of the DMT state that seem to be different, in that people don't normally see the classic grey alien beings under the influence of DMT. They do see other types of aliens, reptilian type aliens, insectoid mantis type aliens, which people also describe in abduction experiences. But I think what the DMT state does is opens up the possibility that just taking the abduction phenomenon seriously doesn't necessarily mean assuming a physical, the physical entrance of these beings into your bedroom at night, but actually they could be using something else. And John Mack, of course, who this great Harvard psychiatrist, the late great John Mack, he extensively, after considering this phenomenon and interviewing large numbers of abduction experiences under hypnosis, he came to the conclusion that perhaps this wasn't a purely physical phenomenon, but that these aliens were in fact interacting in some kind of non-material way. What the nature of that, I think, is unknown, but it's worthy of consideration.
Yeah, I think that there's something to it. I mean, that day Whitley came on, and if you've read Communion, that book was read as if it was an actual alien abduction that came into his place of being where he was. It was kind of horrifying, right?
Yeah.
But now, he's went on so many different spiritual experiences that I had no idea about, to the Monroe Institute, to studying the Sufis and this and that. And he's changed his mind a little bit about things, saying maybe there's something spiritual to this that I'm not understanding. And it was really cool to hear him ask these type of questions, because I always believed his story. Even back in the old days when people were questioning it, I believed his story. And, sometimes you can just tell. I don't know, but sometimes you can tell when someone's giving you an honest experience. But the whole question that I think we should be asking ourselves is the reality of the situation. Like you mentioned earlier, why don't we question what reality is before we say, hey, is DMT real or not? We don't quite understand reality yet. All we know is DMT has given us something incredibly different than what we're used to,
You've hit the nail on the head there, exactly. We really need to get to grips with, what we need to sort of use the DMT experience, this extremely bizarre alternate reality, to kind of inform our model of the normal waking reality, and realize that our normal waking world is but a fragment, is but a thin slice of a much larger structure. And DMT can help us understand the relationship. What is the relationship between our world and that world? And, how is it possible that we can communicate with these beings with such facility? It's just an astonishing time to be alive, to be, the time when actually this molecule has kind of revealed itself, or we have discovered it, and are really starting to use it and to take seriously the idea that we really could be. Finally, we really could be establishing the existence, formally and definitively, the existence of intelligences, not just beyond Earth, but beyond this universe, and not just establishing the existence of them, but actually establishing two-way communication with them. That would be, that's, astonishing to say the least.
Right. Now, you don't seem the type of guy to me, Andrew, that would do clickbait type things. In other words, your title, Building Alien Worlds, I know that means something to you, right? When you say building alien worlds,
yes.
and I know this is not based on research. This could be based on your theories, based on your research. Do you really mean that?
Yeah. So building alien worlds. It comes from the title of the very first paper I wrote on DMT was called Building Alien Worlds, and it's become the title of my website as well. And it's really basically it actually has a neuroscientific underpinning. So the subjective world, as I said at the start of the show, your subjective world is always built by your brain. when you go to the DMT space, your brain is building a world. It's building a world that is entirely different from its normal waking world. And this is the alien world. So building alien worlds really refers to what is actually happening when you smoke DMT. Your brain is shifting from building this world, the normal, parochial little, lovely little fluffy white cloud world, to building a bizarre hyper-technological, hyper-dimensional world replete with the diverse panoply of alien intelligences. You know,
right?
So that's what it refers to, actually.
Yeah. So you talked about earlier that how the human brain was incredibly complex, and there's this dance going on between what we see versus on what we're interpreting, and it's almost like it's interdependent all the time.
Yes.
If that's the case, then we are indeed, in some form or fashion, building the world that we see, right? Is that what you're saying? At all times, we have some type of cause to it. Okay.
Yeah, you're always building a world. It's always a model. It's always a model of reality. It's never the real thing, so to speak, whatever that would mean. If you want to go back to German philosophers, Immanuel Kant, who wrote the what did he write? But anyway, Critique of Pure Reason. He wrote about the idea of the distinction between the phenomenon and the noumenon. So the phenomenon is the world you experience, your subjective world, the world you're always embedded within, and the noumenon is kind of the world in itself, independent of sensory experience, and that's the world. The noumenon is completely inaccessible to us. We have no idea what the world really is like, so to speak. We only have access to our subjective world, and that subjective world is always built by your brain from moment to moment. That doesn't mean it's not related to what's going on outside the world, in the environment. Of course, the brain is always sampling information through through the eyes, the ears, through the sense of touch and smell, all this kind of thing. All of this is information that goes into the brain and basically tells the brain, okay, your model of the world is kind of okay. It needs to be changed in this way. This didn't work. You made this prediction about the world. This didn't happen. And so the brain is constantly updating its model, refining it based upon information that it's getting from outside. But it's always building the model internally. It's always an internally generated model of the world. This is why some people say that reality is kind of like a hallucination. It is really, in a way. Your world is always like a dream that you're experiencing, but it's a dream that has a mapping, has a connection to whatever is going on outside your brain, of course. Except when you're dreaming, of course, then that connection is lost, and so the brain has to kind of do its best, which it does, quite surprisingly well. Actually, the brain is very good at building the normal waking world, even when you are asleep, because it's learned to do it over millions of years, and throughout your life, your brain was learning to construct a model of reality, and it does it with effortlessly now, even if it has no access to sensory information, as during dreaming.
It does make me wonder about, man, we're already up on a break. This is where I wanted to go with this too. Okay. So it does make me wonder about the Matrix, right? And I know that's an old metaphor, that story, but this whole idea of seeing through the veil, seeing the code behind the construct. When, Neo could say, as he started to realize that he's a part of it, building it, and it's building him, instead of having to even use his brain, he could just say no and stop bullets, right? And so, like, this is the idea of what people talk about when Jesus pierced the veil and all of these, metaphors inside of these myths. But that could be based on the science that we know about the double slit experiment, what you're talking about, how the brain works. There could be some real truth to that we are indeed simply just loss of power, simply think that time and space, it's all could indeed just be, in fact, an illusion behind some construct that maybe we're only seeing a part of, or maybe even fuller parts of, when we have a DMT experience.
Exactly, yes. So, this one can go back to quite old ideas now about the so-called brain in a vat. And if you had a brain and you put it into just some kind of jar with the right nutrients, and if you fed that brain the right information, electrically, you could make that brain think that it was it was walking around in the normal waking world, because our place, our apparent place within this world, this real world that's around us, is entirely informed by information that goes into the brain, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there is an external world out there. It just means the brain is receiving that information as if there would be an external world. So, as in the Matrix, where the true human is within this kind of pod, and vat or whatever it is, they think that they're living their lives outside in the real world, whereas in fact they're not, and they're actually part of this whole kind of matrix, this control system, and that could be absolutely the case. There's nothing scientifically, or it's extremely difficult, I think, for us to prove otherwise. And this is why I think the DMT state is so important, because it offers perhaps a glimpse out, exactly as you said. Perhaps the only way to truly know is to actually peek through the veil, and that DMT might indeed be that technology that has been embedded that allows us to peek through this illusory kind of interface that we assume is the real world, but in fact is merely a constructed digital illusion, and DMT provides access to a conduit that takes us out of this illusion and perhaps into this greater reality that we are not, most people are completely unaware exists.
Wouldn't that be fascinating if all of our mythologies and all of our beliefs and everything that we've ever been taught has been nothing but stories surrounding a real construct that's behind, I don't know, the Matrix. A lot of people that have had this DMT experience have said that that's exactly what's going on. We'll be right back with Dr. Andy.
Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
From the news center outside the city of Chicago in the great Midwest, it's the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on the Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt. Here's our headlines. People are still drinking bleach and vomiting, along with other serious side effects. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration this week released an important health warning that everyone should heed. Drinking bleach is dangerous, potentially life-threatening, and you should not do it. The FDA says that the products have been hard to scrub out because of claims on social media where the drinks are promoted along with false health information. Most of the claims can be traced back to Jim Humble, founder and Archbishop of the Genesis 2 Church of Health and Healing, also known as the Church of Bleach. The warning may seem unnecessary, but guzzling bleach is an unfortunate and persistent problem. Unscrupulous sellers have sold miracle bleach elixirs for decades, claiming that they can cure everything from cancer to HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, flu, hair loss, and more. And some have promoted it to parents as a way to cure autism in children, prompting many allegations of child abuse. Source: Ars Technica. And an asteroid warning. A town-sized rock is heading for Earth. A potentially hazardous asteroid big enough to have global consequences is heading Earth's way, with a close approach next year. The massive space rock known as 1998 OR2 is currently swinging around the sun and will be heading Earth's way next year. NASA estimates the object is between 1.8 and 4.1 kilometers wide, a size which could cause global devastation on Earth. The asteroid is set to swing close to Earth on April 29th of 2020, when it will be just 0.04 astronomical units from Earth. 1 astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the Sun, so coming within just 0.04 astronomical units is precariously close. With a maximum size of 4.1 kilometers, the asteroid could easily destroy a country the size of the United Kingdom. While next year's approach will be relatively close, 1998 OR2 will come even closer when it reaches its closest point in April 2079. At that point, the asteroid, which takes 3.7 years to complete a full orbit, will fly by Earth at a distance of 0.01 astronomical units. Scientists estimate that a life-threatening asteroid, such as the one that put an end to the reign of the dinosaur, would collide with Earth every 100 million years or so. Source: The Express UK. And that brings us to the time to put on your Stranger Than Fiction Fringe Fun Fact hat. The monster in Frankenstein was never actually named, although the monster itself proposed the name Adam. This has been the Stranger Than Fiction News on the Fringe FM. Again, I'm Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer.
Hey Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
You're listening to Lighting the Void. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. If you would like to text, you can text in at 501-777-5631.
Andrew Gallimore is our guest tonight. We're discussing DMT. We're also discussing his new book, Alien Information Theory, Psychedelic Drug Technologies, and the Cosmic Game. That is another phrase I'm kind of fascinated that you put in the title, the Cosmic Game. Do you mean the game of what's going on in the realm of psychedelics, or the game that's going on between the communication inside this DMT realm, so to speak?
Yeah, so I think we were kind of discussing the possibility that DMT is some kind of message that's been embedded in our reality, and that I've kind of thought of myself a lot about, you know, if it is a message, what's the point? You know, why has whatever or whoever has embedded this information, this message, this intelligence test in our reality? What is the purpose of it? And it kind of occurred to me that perhaps it was part of some kind of game, and I don't use the word game to make it sound trivial, but actually I think of life really as kind of like a game. You know, I try not to take life too seriously. I think life is a crazy dance. It's an absurd thing to be hurtling around this star, third rock from the sun, on the corner of some obscure galaxy, somewhere in the depths of the Milky Way. It's a very bizarre situation we find ourselves in, and it's very easy to kind of take it extremely seriously and think that this is life is this extremely serious endeavor. I don't treat it like that. I treat life as being kind of like a game, and I see DMT. One thing that DMT shows you, I think, is I always find, and people always remark about, that DMT has, despite being extremely bizarre, it has this kind of comical ambience. It's like it's winking at you. It's a weird,
like it's joking with you and teasing you a little bit the whole time.
It's exactly. It's saying, "Do you get it yet? Do you get the joke? Do you get it?" And I feel like we're kind of, I don't want to say playing a trick on ourselves, or that some intelligence playing a trick on us, but it's like that we're kind of under this illusion that this reality that we're in now is so important, whereas in fact. That actually the purpose of our emerging within this reality is really playing this game, which is to kind of to escape in some way, to access the high dimensional space and go and return home. And it's like, wow, and people always talk about when they burst into this space, these elves kind of cheering and there are kind of lights flashing.
Yeah.
Whistling, and it's like, woo, he's
job,
back,
buddy.
he's back, and they're playing with you, and it's like you came home, and there's this profound sense of deja vu as you burst into this place. So there's a very real sense that the DMT has this tricksterish, mischievous, comical kind of ambience that cannot be dismissed, and I see that it's always informed my thinking about this. I see the end game. I see the role of the game of life, perhaps, as being this cosmic game, a game of cosmic proportions. The aim of which is to discover this little twinkling message in the natural world, kind of like the Hansel and Gretel story, where they leave the little pebbles as they're being led into the forest, and then they use them to find their way back. I see DMT. I wrote in one of my essays. I see kind of DMT as being like these pebbles glistening in the moonlight, kind of leading us back home, and it's kind of like a game to get lost and then to kind of find your way back. So I don't know whether we intentionally have kind of immersed ourselves within this game in the same way one might immerse oneself in a kind of virtual reality, with the aim then of discovering that it's a game and finding our way back and going, it was, I finally made it back. That has always been kind of a fuzzy, intuitive idea in my head that is really what's going on. The mechanics of that and the details are not as clear, and that's something I discuss at great length in the book. Is trying to form a coherent narrative about what is the nature of that game. How does that game actually work? How do you embed intelligent beings inside a kind of digital reality and then allow them to kind of emerge and develop and evolve and discover the message and then find their way out again. That's the idea. But that idea came from a real sense that this reality, and having actually been, I've been in the meeting with these aliens, when they're discussing whether or not to switch off the simulation, some kind of crazy, wild
that's a little
stuff.
Scary, right? What do you mean turn it off? Yeah.
Well, exactly what that was the impression that I got. And people write to me all the time and say, you're right on about this. I wrote an essay called Building Human Worlds, DMT and the Simulated Universe, in which I looked at connections between the idea that we live in some kind of matrix and actually what's going on with DMT. And people wrote to me and said, hey, I've been there. I've seen under the hood of this machine that is keeping this reality going. And you're absolutely right. And so it doesn't. It doesn't. It could be a coincidence, but there seems to be something to it that large numbers of people get this feeling that they see through, and they see this reality as being this digital construct that we are kind of embedded within, but which we can escape using DMT as this technology.
Yeah, imagine that, right? Like you take the Carl Sagan approach; he puts things into perspective. Imagine all the bloodbaths that happened. He just keeps zooming out in the Earth. And he's like. and we're fleas on a ball, right? So you look at it that way too, but you could also imagine it in a way like, I'm Alexander the Great, I'm going to slaughter these people and conquer and create the new world. And then you wake up and the elves are going, good job, buddy. Way to go.
Yeah.
That was some good slaughtering, and you're thinking, what the hell? Oh, okay. Yeah. Like, I was human. That does seem kind of scary. People don't want to think that could be real, right? Because suffering means so much to us, even though I think we cause our own suffering. For sure. It looks like we've got a 828 area code. You're on the air with Andrew Gallimore. Who are we speaking with?
What's up? This is Mike. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, Mike. What's on your mind?
I was just I was going to call in and add a little something to the mix. A little bit of backstory with me. I'm 40, and I grew up kind of like a hippie. When I was probably in my teenage years, we started eating mushrooms and microdots and, just doing the hallucinogenic kind of thing, partying and stuff. And, I had the friends who would always sit and say when they tripped, they seen pink elephants and seen all kinds of crazy stuff. And I never really had that experience, And in my late 20s, it's kind of when ecstasy kind of came into the picture. And me and a friend of mine started kind of messing with ecstasy, and one night we kind of took it to a little bit of extremes. And with X, you kind of take your body temperature up to a different level. Well, ever since then, this kind of goes into something else you had last week. I started seeing shadow people. I have the same 4 shadow people. When I push through this veil, it doesn't matter now if I eat mushrooms, LSD, anything. I've pushed through that one veil that one time, and I see these people every time. And the Hat Man, he's kind of weird, because before I ever heard anything about the Hat Man, I had seen this guy numerous times, probably 20, 30 times. And it was kind of funny, because the Hat Man was the guy who always smoked cigarettes. And I would be tripping, and I would get up and ask the Hat Man for a cigarette. And that was what snapped me back into, like, hey, man, you just, And I wondered, did the doctor ever have people that associate these beings that are around us, or like opening up something that people see when they use these drugs? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And,
so you're asking, do paranormal does doing psychedelics cause paranormal experiences to keep happening in your life? Have you ever? Well, we're talking about with Andrew tonight. We're talking about specifically DMT, though, and his research with that, but. That's a decent question. Have you ever ran across that in your studies or research where somebody has done DMT, and then after that they continued to see beings or have episodes in real life, so to speak?
Well, I think what these kind of experiences demonstrate actually is that the distinction between the DMT state and so-called real life, or any kind of psychedelic or drug-induced state in real life, is actually starts to blur, and you actually realize there's actually a very thin veil between what we would consider to be the normal waking kind of stable world that we assume is the real thing, and paranormal experiences. I think that actually can demonstrate to you that actually the world is very delicate. It's very, very delicate, and the brain is performing a very fine balancing act in constructing your world, and what psychedelics do is they perturb the brain in such a way that the world changes. Now, with DMT, that is quite a profound perturbation that leads to essential switching of the reality channel completely. However, other drugs also change brain activity in different ways, but they can change brain activity such that the world changes, including MDMA. If you take high doses of MDMA, it does have psychedelic properties. It's a psychedelic amphetamine, after all. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that once the brain has learned to kind of shift its tuning, and that's really what it's doing. Imagine shifting a radio slightly out of tune or switching it to an entirely new channel. Once it learns to do that, there is always the possibility that it can achieve that, or even in the absence of the drug. And so once you kind of open that pathway, that doorway, even when the drug is no longer present, these conduits may well still, to an extent, whatever they are, may still be to some extent accessible. And so, seeing shadow people after these kind of experiences, it could simply be manifestation of some low-level, psychiatric condition, or it could be that there is some the brain is somehow tuning into something else, and that something that it achieved under the influence of the psychedelic, and that it is still kind of doing at a much lower level. So, yeah, I think the world is very delicate, and it can be shifted, and these things can happen often at the most surprising of times.
Thank you for your question, Mike. Very good question. And call back on Open Lines Friday night. And I'd like to hear more about your story on that, actually. The what I'm understanding is some of these questions, we don't, like, you remember that Andrew said earlier that we're not in the late stages of understanding this right now. We're in the early stages. And so I think it does need to be respected, although still experimented with in a good environment. And I'll be honest with you guys, I told Andrew during the break, most people want to go to shamans and things like that. I, on the other hand, if I was to have someone else do this for me, I would much, much rather be in, I guess, around people like Rick Strassman or yourself, Andrew, people that know about the science of this. That would make me feel a lot better, especially with all the shamans out there and the YouTube video of me seeing this woman scream because they just gave her way too much 5-MeO DMT. I would rather be around scientists that are in a controlled experimental environment than try to figure out, well, who's the right shaman,
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky in that we're in a much better place these days, in that, 20 years ago, that would have been your choice, really. It would either be, working with a medical scientist, or working with some shaman, which vary in their reputation and their abilities. But now there's more and more now. There are, therapists and counselors and, psychological therapists and people who actually are specifically working with psychedelics and have done for many years now. And so you can actually, you have more options now of actually going to somebody who knows how to handle a trip, who knows how to deal with bad experiences, who knows how to direct the journey to whatever goal you have, whether it's alleviating some psychological condition or whether it's simply exploring your mind. There are now specialists actually that you don't have to rely on a so-called shaman as such, nor do you have to simply go to a psychiatrist who might have his own biases against psychedelics. You can actually go to someone who really does specialize in guiding these kind of experiences.
Now, based on your what you said earlier about building alien worlds, right? What could we do? Could DMT actually change our reality, do you think? Do you think that we could use this to actually change where we're going as far as the future goes? Technology, AI, where the human race goes. Do you think this type of thing, DMT, can actually shift everything for us?
I do. I do take that idea quite seriously. It's a pill to swallow for many people, because I think it involves. It's not going to involve spaceships and leaving the planet. It's not going to be like that. It's going to really jump over that. What's that phrase from? I forget the name of the Russian cosmonaut, but it was echoed by McKenna many times. Is that the Earth is the cradle of mankind. One doesn't remain in the cradle forever. And that's a really powerful idea, the idea that actually we aren't destined. We've perhaps outgrown this little nest, and that we're actually causing more damage now. Our technology is harming this cradle, and perhaps there will come a time where we will need to leave the cradle. Now, does that mean migrating to Mars, which would be the obvious kind of approach to that, another planet, perhaps within the solar system or outside of it? Or would it be something much more profound than that, where we actually cast off our physical bodies entirely, now that we understand the nature of intelligence, and that perhaps that intelligence, our own intelligence, isn't necessarily restricted to a wet brain, but actually could in fact be transcribed, transferred, uploaded, choose your term, to some other space, might actually be possible within the next century. And that DMT could indeed be the tool that will facilitate that. That is something that I've I've written about in the book, this idea of transcription, the final kind of stage of the game, the resolution of the game, if you like. But people have, have got some quite hostile reactions to it because, it sounds like some kind of suicide cult, right? The idea that you would inject yourself with large amounts of DMT over many days, and then you would leave behind your physical body. That sounds like suicide by DMT. And if you go in with a purely physicalist, materialist approach to that, then that's really kind of what it is, right? You're dying. You're essentially your physical body is gone. So is it not like suicide? And of course, my response would be no. It's nothing like suicide because you are leaving the material world behind. You are entering a realm where you perhaps are going to be extant, to actually live for many years. And actually much longer than one could ever hope to live, in this little brief sojourn we have in the material world. So if it's a delicate issue because some people are wedded to the idea that we need to get back to nature, which I think is a very valuable and perfectly reasonable approach. But some people are kind of more like futurists and post-humanists who want to say, actually, no, let's leave the Earth behind, let the Earth recover, and we need to head for the stars and beyond. And those feel kind of like opposing forces to an extent. And I don't think necessarily fundamentally they necessarily are opposing, but they feel like it. One is going back towards the Earth and the other is firing itself in the opposite direction. But DMT does feel like something that points away from the Earth. It feels like it's pointing to somewhere altogether different.
Well, when it comes to consciousness exploration specifically, we can only do certain things. I mean, we can do meditation, we can do transcendental meditation, or we can do sensory deprivation, or we can do the psychedelic journey. Either way, what I find fascinating about this whole subject is, regardless of all of that, the people that have had breakthrough, not just regular DMT experiences, but what you call breakthrough DMT experiences, has been so profound for them that they have actually stated things like, I saw the construct of reality, or I was in a place that was reality. This wasn't really reality. And it's just this pattern that keeps being told that makes people like me curious, that want to look into this. And I think that's good. I think that's perfectly natural that we're in the curiosity stage of this. What I think the biggest problem is where people get hung up is they're holding on to their ideas of spirituality, morality, and ethics. And they feel like, I don't know, maybe they're going to burn in hell if they try this stuff, or there's going to be some type of never-ending physical thing that happens to them because they did it, bad karma. And we need to realize that these are the types of things that are holding us back, hell, even spiritually, scientifically sometimes. We've got to be able to go out there and test new things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you go into the DMT state with sort of ideological and dogmatic assumptions about the goal of humanity and the structure of reality, all of those things. I mean, what DMT actually is very good at is actually kicking your ass, so to speak, right? It really will slap you in the face if you go in there with your nice little assumptions about what's really going on. That kind of person, in my opinion, is most likely to get their ass whooped. To use the American terminology there, by these entities, because they will say, "Hey, you think you know what's going on? Well, I'll show you what's going on, sir." That kind of thing, and people do experience in that. So if you go in with a very strict, kind of non-rigid ideology, then you expect to have that tested in quite a profound way. Believe me.
Yeah, that is funny. You get your beliefs get knocked around like ping pong balls, right? And you come back going, I don't know what the hell that was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. There's a few more questions I want to ask you here. You guys, if you want to get your questions in, now's the time. Okay. So the call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. You can also text in at 501-777-5631 or drop a question in the chat room at the chat room on thefringe.fm. It just says chat at the top. All you got to do is sign up with your name and email, and you'll be in our cult of Discord and on the Fringe FM. We'll be right back with Andrew Gallimore. So.
Of the show is being brought to you by Charles Atlas Bird Seed, the only bird seed that'll put muscles on your canary. Yes, after eating Charles Atlas Bird Seed for just 1 month, your bird will be able to lick any cat in the neighborhood with one wing tied behind its back.
Ever seen an extraterrestrial? It can be hard to believe they exist unless you've seen one for yourself. What if I told you I've seen them my whole life, but have never had a witness who shared the encounter with me? Now, what if I told you I saw 4 of them, 2 with blue skin, and there are over 20 witnesses to this CE5 event? My new book, The Blue Beings, Visitation at the UFO Conference, documents actual accounts from real witnesses, many of which have gone on record to attest to this otherworldly reality. Be a part of the quantum paradigm shift that is taking place right now. Go to johnpolkmedia.com to get your copy of The Blue Beings, Visitation at the UFO Conference, on sale right now at johnpolkmedia.com. That's JOHNPOLK media.com.
Introducing Shadow Light Tarot from Waking Canvas, the Fringe FM's new contributing artist, Eric Tesey. This hand-illustrated black and white self-published deck serves as a reinvention of the tarot, never before witnessed. Each of the several suits of this 88-card deck lineup form an infinite panoramic scene. Even the included visual companion guidebook is entirely hand-illustrated, cover to cover, with beautiful visuals and esoteric symbols and artwork. The newly released deck comes in a custom magnetic box with its own travel pouch. The Shadow Light Tarot Premium Deck and its travel-sized mini deck Wonder Light Tarot are both available now from WakingCanvas.com. If you use the code word FRINGE, that's FRINGE at checkout, you'll receive an extra 10% off your entire order. To discover more, including a free reading and time lapses of all the illustrated artwork, make your way over to WakingCanvas.com today. That's WakingCanvas.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of the Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
Who were the real ancient Egyptians? What is it about ancient Egypt that captivates us all? The critically acclaimed series Magical Egypt is back with all new episodes. Let Chance Gardner and company take you on another adventure through Magical Egypt in the new series Magical Egypt 2. Magical Egypt 2 attempts a forensic reconstruction of the science of the ancients through a study of ancient aesthetics. Also, the best researchers and authors in the field like John Anthony West, Graham Hancock, Laird Scranton, Robert Duval, Lon Duquette, Aaron Cheek, and more join together to explore the topics of the esoteric and the hidden messages of the ancient Egyptians. Just go to magicalegypt.com right now and put in the code word FRINGE and get 10% off any download or order, including the groundbreaking original Magical Egypt series, as well as the new episodes in Magical Egypt 2. Also, check out the great work and the companion series at magicalegypt.com. Click the banner on the Fringe FM or go to magicalegypt.com and use the code word FRINGE and get 10% off your order today while it lasts.
This portion of the show is being brought to you by Ed's flavor-reduced beer, the one that gives you all the calories of regular beer with only half the taste.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? Cannasense is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. Cannasense does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the cost, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will supplant recreational perceptions, and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and Cannasense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. We're here with Andrew Gallimore, and we're talking about his book, Alien Information Theory, Psychedelic Drug Technologies, and the Cosmic Game. Don't forget, tomorrow night is our New Moon special with the fantastic, witchy, and Halloween-ish woman, Mary Ducina. So if you want a freaky psychic experience, even if you don't believe in psychics, I suggest you listen to that show tomorrow night, because you might change your mind. But tonight we're speaking, again, like I said, with Andrew Gallimore. We're talking about his book, which is on sale right now on Amazon. I think it's like $25 for the hardcover. This is the time to get it before the softcover comes out, because that's a really good price for this book. And with your background and education in this, I don't think it's going to be a waste of money at all. I've got Rick's book here. I've got Aaron Voots, and this is going to be the next one I get to look into this. So, yeah, I wanted to discuss, too, as I brought this up in your introduction, Andrew, that you're working with Rick Strassman, and everybody knows Rick Strassman for the spirit molecule, specifically as it pertains to prolonging the DMT experience. Now, to some, and I told you this during the break, that's kind of like mad scientisty a little bit, right? Like, hey, let's see how much further we can go. But really, if this is a natural thing, and if our body gets rid of it naturally, it's probably a good idea to stay in this realm a little bit longer, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking earlier that I see DMT as being a technology. That we've when we discovered DMT, we uncovered this technology embedded in our world. When you discover a technology or a tool, you learn to use it, and it would be hugely presumptuous to assume that we found, simply by vaporizing an ill glass pipe, that we'd found the ideal or most optimal way of using DMT. I think that's a massively mistaken assumption. And also, of course, in terms of the experience itself, it is brief. For most people, that's a wonderful thing that it is so brief, because it is such a shattering experience. However, experienced users do express some degree of frustration that they can't hang around in that space. That just as they're the place is starting to kind of stabilize, and they're kind of orienting themselves within the DMT space, perhaps starting to communicate with some intelligences, they're then sort of dragged back into the normal waking consensus world. So it occurred to me also that it was rather rude. If we really take seriously the idea that these are intelligences and that they exist, they kind of burst into their world, wander around wide-eyed, mouth agape for 5 minutes, and then bugger off out the back door again, is kind of not the way to handle interdimensional diplomacy, so to speak. So I think there are many reasons why, for me, simply smoking DMT in a glass pipe, which I perfectly respect, by the way, it's a valid way of using DMT, is not the optimal way of using DMT, and that we need to think of ways of remaining in the space, of controlling the level of DMT in the brain. That's really the key here, is to bring the level of DMT into the brain to a certain level such that you are in the DMT space, and then to maintain that. And that is more difficult. Normally what happens, whether you smoke DMT or whether you take it with something like ayahuasca, the levels rise in the brain either within sort of 30 seconds if you smoke it, or over an extended period of time, over 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes with ayahuasca. But either way, the levels rise in the brain. They kind of plateau quite briefly, and then they start to fall again. So this is a normal way that drugs behave in the body. So if you want to actually hold someone in the DMT space, what you need to do is find a way of regulating the level of DMT in the brain so that you can actually bring them into the DMT space and then hold the level of DMT in the brain such that they remain in that space for, it could be hours, it could be days even, or even longer.
Whoa.
That's that's looking into the future. That would be the idea, and that you could actually go for really extended expeditions in DMT space and actually carry out more formal exploration. And it would involve mathematicians and neurologists and linguists and you name it. All these different types of specialists would be involved in this kind of expedition. And bringing back information from the DMT space over time, and that really requires you to be able to bring someone into the space and hold them there and have some kind of control. So this is really where Rick Strassman came in, because it occurred to me that the technology that I was thinking about was a technology that kind of exists for other drugs, for anesthetic drugs particularly. So general anesthetics, when you go for an operation and you're put under general anesthetics, that you're put to sleep, what the anesthesiologist will do is they will use a technique called target controlled intravenous infusion, which means that they use a programmable infusion device that will deliver a stream of drug into your bloodstream and thus into your brain, according to a mathematical model for that particular drug, which will then allow them to put you to sleep and then hold the level of this anesthetic drug in your brain constant, so that you remain asleep. And they can push you deeper, or they can bring you out a little bit, and then of course they can bring you out completely at the end of the operation. So this is the technology, and I thought, well, DMT seems to have all the kind of pharmacological properties of drugs that are used in this kind of technology. So why not try it with DMT? And so I knew, of course, about Rick's work. Everybody knows about Rick's work. And so I sent him an email, and I said, I want to develop this technology. Do you have some data that I can use, some blood sampling data? And sure enough, he, within less than an hour, he delivered me this old Excel file from about 20 years ago that had all of the blood sampling data from his subjects. And
wow.
So that was kind of exactly what I needed.
Very
that
cool.
allowed me, that allowed me then to develop this pharmacokinetic model, this mathematical model of DMT distribution and metabolism in the brain, that then formed the backbone of this technology, which we published together. Is this paper that describes the technology, basically.
So are you allowed to do this now? Are you allowed to try these experiments yet? Are you ready to go to try to prolong it, do you think? I mean, as far as like trials and whoever gets the permission to do this.
I mean, the model as we published it is really kind of like a proof of principle, like, just demonstrate that it work. But then there are a number of steps one has to take before one actually implements it in human being. The model was really a model for an average human being, which of course doesn't really exist. So humans are very variable in various different aspects, pharmacological and physiological. So there's a number of testing and refinements and validations that need to take place. But that is being done. There is a group at Imperial College London, led by Robin Carhart-Harris and Professor David Nutt. They are seriously thinking about implementing it, not for establishing communication with alien intelligences. They're doing it for a much more academic reason, so that they can actually study the DMT infused brain for extended periods. but the result will still be the same. The technology will be there and will be available for anyone really with access to a programmable infusion device, which are actually pretty cheap. For less than $1,000, you can get one of these infusion devices. That doesn't mean I'm recommending people go out and do this. It's not at all. The technology really needs to be refined and developed. It's not just about the device, it's also about how the device is controlled and the mathematical model that's behind it in order to get this to work. It could be very dangerous if it was just done recklessly. So there's another group in Colorado head by Daniel McQueen called dmtx.org. People can go to that website and it'll describe that they're really trying to kind of closer to my original vision in that, taking the idea that these are places to explore and to navigate and to map and to, establish communication with these intelligences. They're kind of taking more that approach, but they have a much less academic, established academic team behind them. So they face more hurdles, but they're very tenacious. They're actually doing a retreat next week, and they've actually got the first clutch of volunteers for these extended DMT psychonauts. Have already, there's already a handful of people that have volunteered.
Yeah, I was going to say I got 5 right now. I could send them. They'll happily do this stuff. Yeah, and I mean, I kind of would too. Again, I'm saying I trust this type of environment more than I do. Just the shaman thing. And that kind of, I wanted to ask you this earlier, and I'll ask now, the idea of taking ayahuasca, and I get why people do it. They have a milder, prolonged experience like this, but do you think that's even it's another thing, right? That's really not necessary. The purging, the sickness, all the stuff you go through just to have that experience. Do you think it's even worth it?
Well, I mean, I think one has to. I mean, I have a deep respect for that particular tradition. I mean, without these indigenous traditions, we wouldn't have discovered DMT, or certainly wouldn't have discovered it in the way that we did, in the time that we did, because it was DMT was discovered by Stephen Zara, who was looking at one of these traditional kind of snuffs that contains DMT. So traditional kind of more spiritual uses of DMT in the form of ayahuasca, it has a whole. There's a whole. It's interconnected with a whole range of mystical ideas and spirituality and the earth and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's important that ayahuasca is used within that kind of embedded within that environment. These real good shamans, anyway, they know exactly what they're doing, and they can, and I think it is, for many people, an extremely profound and important experience. And I don't see my idea or my way of using DMT as being in competition or as even as being an advancement. I just think it's a completely different way of looking at it. Ayahuasca is a very is embedded within that particular worldview, within that particular mythology, that particular religious position that these indigenous people have, and that must be respected for sure. I'm taking a completely different approach where we're using purified DMT to reach very much higher levels in the brain than are reached with ayahuasca. 5 or 6 times higher. When you smoke DMT, the level of DMT in your brain goes, it's about 5 or 6 times higher than would ever be reached under the influence of ayahuasca. So they're completely different things. And so, I try not to compare them. I certainly would never say that my approach is superior. It's just a very different way of working with DMT.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. I know that what you're talking about, though, right now would be interesting to. I'm curious about what Rogan would think about it. I guarantee you, I've watched that. Everybody's listened to the Rogan podcast, right? I wonder if someone said, "Hey, man, I found a way to prolong this experience," right? What would you be interested in it? I bet he would volunteer for it too. It's like, yeah. I mean, this is important to him, and there are people in the chat room right now even asking, do you think he would want to stay like in this experience forever? I mean, how long do you think the human mind could handle it? That's a pretty good question.
It's an excellent question, actually, because as I've been saying throughout this discussion, this conversation, is that the brain is constructing a model of reality, and it uses information from the environment, and every time you open your eyes and you look out and you see the world, your brain is being changed by the information it's receiving in subtle ways. And under the influence of DMT, if you're there for a long time, your brain is essentially going to start to learn, in effect, to construct a completely different model of reality, and will actually start to change. And so the question then is, what happens when you cut off the DMT and you try to return to the normal waking world? What's that transition going to be like after you've been for 3 weeks in the DMT state?
Right.
And that's something that we simply don't know the answer to that question. That's something that will come out of these experiments. Of course, I'm not suggesting that people should immediately be diving in for 3 weeks. So there's a lot of other considerations need to go into. How do you feed people, for a start? How do you get rid of waste? These are practical issues that need to be dealt with. But initially it would be 30 minutes, and then an hour, and then a couple of you would extend it gradually, and any kind of issues that need to be dealt with would be dealt with there and then. So it's a process. This is not the finished, pristine, gleaming technology. This is just the first idea that would then, the nascent form of the technology in a prototypic kind of stage that would then be developed over time, and that might take several years to reach the kind of stage where people are routinely lying down next to one of these machines and then sort of plugging in some kind of time, saying I want to go for a week, and then setting off. And that's a little bit in the future, but I do see that. I call it the D matrix machine. This machine cool. that would be fairly common, that people would be able to set off to the universe next door with relative ease.
Now, this is kind of a nerdy question, but it's for me. It's based on absolutely zero research. Okay. But
Sure.
Do you think that it's possible accessing these realms that we could actually see into, I don't know, Alpha Centauri or whatever planet, that there are actually races of beings, like I said in my introduction of the show, that understand this, that communicate this way? Do you think that's possible?
I absolutely do think that's possible, and you're right that these I tend to focus on, for various reasons, I tend to focus on beings outside of our universe, simply because the DMT space does seem like an entirely separate universe. But certainly it's possible that intelligences that have evolved within this universe, but have evolved over a much longer period of time, may well have established techniques for communicating. And presumably, if they're traveling vast distances, they have some handle on the structure of space-time. And on the way that information can be transmitted, and that they may well be using, substances, chemicals, programs that interface with the brain directly, such as that would seem to us to be a psychoactive drug of some sort that would allow communication between these different races of alien intelligences to take place. I think it's a perfectly reasonable possibility.
And that means, guess what? Then it's perfectly reasonable to say, like, as you said before, what if Alex Jones was right? There
Exactly.
is actually a whole blog article you wrote about this with every single, I would say, every single variable in mind when it comes to what he was talking about there. Make no doubt about it. Like, I have no question in my mind that some of the highest company, like Google, you name it, the government, are definitely experimenting with this stuff. Because think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes people that have, at the very least, that don't have an awareness to anything, somebody that has a belief structure that's really walled in. They have one major DMT experience, and they're open to new things, studying new things. I've even heard how some people's intelligence has increased. So that's enough right there for the government to get involved. But if you're actually speaking with other entities and stuff, they're definitely going to get involved with that. I mean, look, they did it with remote viewing and everything else. But there's something more real to this than I would say than most other things that we talk about, like Montauk and mind control. That's another thing while I got you here. Crazy off, just left turn real quick. But you study the human mind, right? Project Montauk, mind control stuff. You think that's possible, that it's real, that they really do those types of things?
I don't rule anything out. I mean, I'm not an expert. I couldn't say the mechanism or how that worked, but
it's programmable. The brain, though, yeah, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah, absolutely. The brain is essentially it's a extremely complex computational device, and once you understand the way that computer ticks, so to speak, it's always open to hacking, I guess, with the word we might use. In a sense, psychedelic drugs, they kind of hack the brain and that they alter the way that it operates. Are there other ways of achieving that? Almost certainly, yes.
Yeah, for sure. And I used to not believe in any of this stuff, man. Like none of it. All you conspiracy wackos, you don't know what you're talking about until you start to see your own programs. And psychedelics will do that to you. It'll get to where you can see your own programs. I've noticed that in your presentations, like if people really want to get an effective view of what you're talking about, they can go on YouTube and watch a couple of your presentations, which I find fascinating. That it seems to me that you're talking about there is some type of communication that's coming in through base form through this stuff. Is it like binary code? That's what I'm trying to understand. Is it basic geometry? You know how some people say crop circles are messages from consciousness or Mother Earth just trying to open us up to certain things or increase our awareness. You get that kind of same feel with DMT and some of the messages that are coming through?
Yeah, I get the feeling that, I mean, whenever you talk about messages, it's always about the flow, the movement of information. A message is really transmission of information from a sender to a receiver. The sender which creates the message, and then the receiver which receives and then decodes and understands the message. And the question really about with DMT is how does that information transfer take place? How does information from this other place and these other intelligences, how can it enter your brain? And that's really what has to happen for you to communicate with these species, these beings. So really that's the whole book really is trying to develop a kind of a coherent, cogent model of how that might work, of how that information might be transmitted from these orthogonal dimensions of reality into this little realm, a little slice of reality that we exist in.
I think everybody really needs, if you're interested in this is a really good scientific approach to this and an academic approach to this subject. I do want to say there are some general questions I would like you to address. One being, when people say, oh, well, you're talking about prolonging the experience. Are you talking about now it seems like you're chasing a high? Well, I noticed that in a couple messages in the chat room. You don't really get high when you do this. I mean, earlier you were talking about how you can get beat up, like basically your beliefs just get tossed around. That doesn't sound like a euphoric experience to me.
No, it's not a high. The DMT state is not a high. Highs can really be applied to a completely different class of drugs, or classes of drugs. The amphetamine, the stimulant type drugs, and the sort of narcotic drugs. These are psychedelics. These are mind manifesting drugs. They change the structure of your reality. It is not a high at all. It is a reality channel switch. You are certainly not chasing a high in the same way that one might become habitually a habitual user of cocaine or heroin at all. This is nothing like that at all. There's no habit forming addictive property of DMT at all. Most people use it once and they don't go back to it for quite a long time, just to integrate the experience. So no, it's completely different.
I agree, and I haven't even done it yet. I only agree based on what everybody said. Look, I really thank you for coming on the broadcast. I really appreciate it. I know you got to get back to your work, and because you're in Japan right now, it would be cool. I think you're the first guest we've ever had that's spoken to us from Japan. But I want everybody to go check out the book. Also, give them a follow. Look, buildingalienworlds.com. You have your blog there, your writings, your pretty much everything we've talked about tonight in more detail on the website, right?
Yeah, so my website, buildingalienworlds.com. So there's sections on my writings, a lot of papers I've written about DMT. Also, there is lectures that I've given that are kind of linked. They link to YouTube videos, etc. Podcasts, interviews, and the blog on there as well as a contact page. So if you've got a burning question, as long as it's fairly brief. I don't want a 3-page trip report. I just don't have the time. But yeah, a brief question, then there's a contact page, and I try to get back to people. But if they're too rambling and incoherent, then you might might not get a response, but I do my best. And then the book, of course, you can also order the book from my website directly, or you can go to Amazon and go and search for Alien Information Theory, and that will come right up.
Fantastic. And you can also give them a follow at Alien Insect on Twitter. That's right, Alien Insect, right? And Alien Insect on Instagram.
Yeah, please do that, yeah.
I don't know how many copies of this book are available in hard copy, but if you want the hard copy, I would grab it now for the price that it's at now. And listen, thanks for coming on the broadcast. This has been a big deal to me, but to be able to talk to you about this with your background and all of your presentations. I've got a lot better understanding about what you're doing, where this whole DMT thing is as far as the research is going. And this has been a really, really pleasant conversation for me.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
You guys, all the links will be there too for you podcast listeners that don't make it out to the live show. That'll be there for you as well. All the links, all the social links. Grab the book. We'll be back. I want you to, if you can, as we wrap the show down, if you've had an experience with DMT, give us a call. Call in. I'd like to hear about it in the last 30 minutes of the show. We'll be right back.
With housewiththeendofthedrive.com. You're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
This is Al. I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing his journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much for a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
You're listening to the Fringe FM, and I'm Michael Deacon reminding you can find my show right here on the Fringe FM every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, or by going to michaeldeacon.com. The choice is yours.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves stripped bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand three truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137, now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247, now only $147, shipped in one business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
This is Reverend John M. Polk. Please visit me at johnpolkmedia.com and visit my show, Quantum Hologram Matrix, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, every Tuesday on thefringe.fm.
This is Rev Dan Lopez from Spiritual Warrior Today Radio, and you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the Fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, me old China plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Light in the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your northern self and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you beat a Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
I like to listen to Lighting the Void because of the guests, the content, and the host, Joe Roop. He's smart, he's intelligent, and he seems to ask the questions that we all have on our mind. We're all searching for the truth, and Joe helps us get closer to it. I love this show. I love this show. I love this show. Lighting the Void.
This is Jason Lindgren from Crow 777 Radio, and you can hear us 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday night here on the Fringe FM.
Alex Exum.
This is Alex Exum of the Exum Experience in Live Talk, where we discuss current events, society, and culture. My shows are based in actuality, actual existence, contrasted with what was intended, expected, or believed. You can listen to me live Tuesdays at 7 p.m. only on KTLK, The Fringe FM.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. Now, if you've had an experience with this, I'd like to hear about it. Please call in at 1-800-588-0335. You can also call in at 501-424-5130. Even it doesn't necessarily have to be DMT, but that would be epic. But any type of psychedelic experience that you've had and what the after effects of it would be, please give us a call. Also, don't forget tomorrow night, Mary Ducina is going to be here with us. It's our new moon special. Once again, Mary Ducina is here. And if you have, usually the phones just break when she comes on, but if you have like a natural skepticism towards psychic abilities, or you want to get a free reading, or you just are curious about who Mary Ducina is, you definitely need to call in. And if you're even got more time on your hands and you're more curious, you can go back through our archives, which is on YouTube. Also, our archives are on iTunes, Stitcher, Android, what is it now? Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify. All of that is there for free. So we keep it that way because the support keeps coming in. I do have a membership site there for like commercial free archives, but as long as support keeps coming in for the show, then, it'll always remain free. The archives will always remain free. Now, I do want to say one more thing before we start taking your calls and we speak to Miss Lady Ann about this too, is that I know that I lag on the archive sometimes, but you have to understand that my whole focus is on the Fringe FM, all of the other shows that I produce, as well as this nightly show that comes on too. And so sometimes, the archives will lag, but I won't get them in a situation where you're going to have to wait like 3 days or something before you ever hear the archive. So last night's show with Jaap Van Etten is going to be on. That'll be up tomorrow, as well as tonight's show will be up too. So Now, if you are interested in commercial-free archives and you'd be willing to do that, because some people, you know, they don't want to support just because they don't know where their money's going, because they're afraid I'm going to buy ginger beer or something. Let me know. You know, if enough people get involved and say they want it, I'll make it fair. You know, it'll be like $3 to $5 or something for it. It'll be commercial-free archives with extra content as well, because you know, some people just don't like hitting that fast forward button through the commercials. And I try to make our commercials fun. Now, guess what? I don't know how stable our connection is. I may have to call her on the phone. But Lady Ann is back in the virtual shack with us again. Lady Ann, are you there?
I am.
You jumped right out of the gate. And I said, you know, I don't want to do this experience alone. DMT, I don't want to do it alone. And you said, well, I'll do it with you. Why
That
were you,
I did.
Why were you the first one to be so brave? I'm growing very fond of you, if people haven't noticed.
It's something that I've thought about before. I mean, an ability to connect with beings? Well, yeah, why not?
It doesn't matter what kind of beings they are. What if they're scary? What if they beat you up like he was talking about?
Well, I mean, but what if they're not?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you never know. So I would definitely be willing to take that chance. I want to know more. I want to connect with, you know, the universe and different beings, if that's really real. And yeah.
Now, you can only stay right now the way they have it. You can only stay, like if you did take DMT, you would only be able to stay in this realm for 5 to 15 minutes. So in that 5 to 15 minutes before you start fading out, if there was one experience that you would like to see, what would it be? Would it be the geometry, the construct, or would you really want to meet like a machine elf? Is it really all about the entities for you?
You know, to be honest, I would want to go into it being completely open and just allowing the universe to show me what it is I'm supposed to see or know or connect with for that first experience. Granted, it was a good one, you know, because we're not limited to just one experience. So why not have the first one just be an open experience?
That's fair enough.
No limitations. Yeah.
Fair enough. I look at it like Stargate, right? That's the way he had me thinking, like that movie Stargate. You know, if this is the way it really is, then you could go into this experience. You could go through the Stargate, so to speak, and you can only stay in there so long and then come out. I would want to see like another humanoid. I want to see if there's real, like Travis Walton said, humanoid figures that look just a little bit different than us. I want to go to wherever they are.
Right.
What are they called, by the way? The human, everybody says, look how beautiful they are. The humanoid alien figures, a lot of their blonde haired, blue eyed. What are they called?
Oh, right.
There's a name for them.
It's not the Lumerians, is it?
Nah, there's a different name for them. I don't know what it is.
Arcturians?
Maybe. That's maybe. You know, when I get on here, I can't even think of names and stuff anymore. But if there's other human races out there in the universe, I want to know about it. Look at that.
Right.
Lady Ann is such a sweetheart. Yes, Lady Ann is a sweetheart. That's for sure. And by the way, for the first time ever, I've invited Lady Ann down here to Arkansas with me to go to the paranormal conference. Everybody knows I don't like to go to conferences and stuff, but the Arkansas Paranormal Conference Expo is, it's kind of like when you go back to meet your family for the first time. Nordic. That's right, Dan. Duh. Nordic beings. Okay. It's kind of like when you go back and you go back with family or you have that family reunion. They really make me feel that way every time I go there. And it's not a very large event, but the people from Board Camp Crystal Mine are going to come up, and it's something that like I have to go to now, you know, and it's really going to be cool to have some help there. Maybe I can actually let you talk on the microphone while we're there so I can go around and shake hands.
I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be my first event that I've attended, so.
Yeah, and if you're in Arkansas or around Arkansas, it's going to be October the 5th and the 6th. Saturday, I'm not sure if I'm going to be there Sunday or not. I'm hoping so. It'll really be depending on the traffic and what's going on that weekend. But Saturday, for sure, we'll be out there. We'll have the booth out there. I'm going to try to get some swag and T-shirts and stuff this time instead of having, a paper sign with a birthday cloth on top of it. Last time I left Corbin there. I just said, hey, just, hold the booth down. I felt like such a jerk, terrible dad. But I got to tell you about this experience I had there. This was last year. No, it was actually the year before last, and Rusty went with me. And I had the booth there, right? And I had the just the Fringe FM banner below the table, and I was wearing shorts. Now, these were dress shorts, like golf-style dress shorts, and that's all I had. This is why your mother always tells you to take a change of clothes with you everywhere you go, right? So I'm back, I get to the booth and I sit down really fast, and I kind of sat down in a way where I had a wider base, and I sat down really fast, and it stretched the inseam of my shorts and ripped them from the zipper down to the leg, right? And I mean, just immediately you could feel the air just come in. And I was like, holy shit, right? And there's a few booths across from me. These girls are selling like Ghost Away spray or something. I don't know. They had like bottles of spray Ghost Away. And so I got my hands down there, and I'm kind of like trying to scoot over behind the sign so nobody can see me. And I know one of those women saw me because her face turned red when she looked at me, and I was like, oh shit, like, did she see that, God, I hope not. Right.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was a hot day. You don't want anybody to see all that. And so I'm stuck at the booth, and Rusty's gone. Jeff's not there. Corbin's not there. So I literally called. This is so embarrassing, man. I called my dad, my father. And my dad's like, what? I thought you was at this paranormal event or whatever. What do you want? And I'm like, well, I need some shorts. And he's like, what? The hell are you talking about? And I said, I ripped my shorts and I can't move. Like, I literally can't move. I'm supposed to do interviews in about an hour, cannot move. And when you bring them to me, you've got to be real sneaky like, don't just bust up in here and go, here's your shorts, So yeah, that was an interesting experience. My son, God love him. This is why family is so important. He made it a point to like hide my shorts, right? And then he got on, there's a little elevator in this building. It goes from level 1 up to level 2. And he walked over there and he goes, here, and just handed them to me. And I said, all right, you got a bag? Walk me to the bathroom, right? So he picks up this bag, my son does, and just holds the bag to where I'm walking at this angle, right? To where I can get to the bathroom, and nobody ever saw what happened. I couldn't believe it, And,
wow.
That's why I'm bringing you in case something like that happens again. I don't want to be alone.
I'm there for you.
Would you be willing to help me out of that jam?
Of course, I'll take care of you.
That would be fantastic, because that was a nightmare for me.
I'm sure. I can understand that.
Speaking of nightmares, I think this time we might actually put the booth down. So this is MacArthur Museum. This is where where the war generals and stuff met up, and it was one of those houses where people slept into. But at the bottom is it's underground on purpose, in case the place got bombed or attacked or whatever. There's like this war room type thing. They have seances down there every time, and it's like a very kind of like haunting experience. Well, they told me that I could put the booth down there in that thing, and it would take me away from the crowd, but wouldn't it be cool if we actually picked up some EVPs and stuff in there?
No, that would be fascinating. That'd be a lot of fun. I just don't want any, I don't want to take anything home.
What do you mean? Like take any haints back home with you or something?
That's right.
Does that really happen?
Yeah, you can get attachments from anywhere.
Yeah, no wonder I got so many haints here, because I never even know, I didn't even know that was a thing. So what do you do when you leave a paranormal conference? If you leave a paranormal conference, that is interesting. Are you subject to more haints? Sorry, haints is a southern term for poltergeist. But do you have a higher possibility of getting bad juju on you just because you're at a paranormal event, I wonder?
I mean, it depends on the people that you're around and their energy, the energy and spirits attached to the location that you're at. But at the same time, it's really not too awful different from going to the grocery store or checking out a haunted hotel spirits are everywhere. If you could actually see, the spirit realm with your own eyes here, I think you'd be surprised that there's just as many, I think, spirits roaming around as there are people roaming around.
What's your, I don't know why we started talking about this, but I don't really care. DMT, we might, you know what?
Right.
If you're coming down, well, I'll just say that might happen, and then we'll do a whole show about it. What do you think?
I'm down.
I just don't want to do it by myself. I don't want to be like in the grass somewhere flipping out. If I can find this, let me see if I can find this. There's a video. The only thing that scares the hell out of me from doing DMT is, I don't know if you saw it, but this woman literally does freaks out on DMT big time. Right. Oh yeah, this is it. I don't know all right, so you guys prepare yourself for this. So I'm not saying that DMT is dangerous, but if you go to a shaman or one of these, quote, shamans that know what they're doing, and they give you here, hit it again, hit it again, you got to watch out because you don't know what they're going to do to you. Listen to this. Let's see if I can get this on the air here. So she takes a big dose of DMT, right? They got towels wrapped around her. Now she loses her leggings, so these guys are letting her lay on the beach or whatever. Now she's flipped over on her belly. Listen to this. Hello. This guy's doing Can you imagine that? She's trapped. Think about that. That might happen. Mm-hmm. That's why I don't want to do it alone, right?
Right.
She's kicking the water with her feet like a baby, screaming to the top of her lungs. Mm-hmm. And this guy's just holding a maraca or whatever. You're okay. Yeah. Just whatever, man. I would get in a fight. I would be in jail after that.
Well, then again,
I'm sure you're going to find something spiritual about this.
Well, what if she's, purging some demons?
Dude.
Maybe it's a healing. No, I know, but if it's really connected to spirit and all that stuff.
What if it's not, though? What if it's all in the mind? Look, there's DMT. Well, I probably need to be clear about this. So there's DMT, and then there's 5-MeO DMT, which is more potent, right? They were, we even had callers call in and say, hey, Joe, if you're going to do this stuff, make sure that you start out small. Don't just go the full Monty and try to have a breakthrough experience. Like this woman, they were giving her bong rips of this stuff and then covering her with towels of 5-MeO DMT. Now, what kind of shaman in his right mind would do that?
True. No, you definitely would want to start small. There should be a whole process to it, not just jumping into the deep end.
Now, I'll be honest with you guys. I went out and looked for this stuff on my own. And that's what is that? Can somebody lock me up for saying that? Maybe. I don't know. I never got any of it. How about that? But I ran into some people that would say things like, yeah, I said, well, do you have, what did you see? Did you have an experience? What happened? Well, man, I saw some Egyptian stuff, if that's what you mean. Yeah, like a little bit. And I'm like, wow, thanks. So that's another thing, is getting a hold of it too. I'm sure somebody listening would happily volunteer if this was to really happen and help me out and guide me in the right direction. Hint. Anybody out there? But you're serious though. You'd really do this with me. Like I wouldn't do it. You would, for sure.
Of course I would.
God, you're so brave. What if I flip out though? Like what if I'm the one screaming like a baby and you're there and everybody sees? What are you going to do?
I'll comfort you.
With a rattler
what
like that shaman? Are you going to hit a tambourine?
Well, if there's somebody there that knows of what to do, then I'll, do what they tell me to do. But other than that, all I can do is whatever my intuition tells me to do.
What if I just, do me a favor, would you? If I start screaming like that, call 911. 911.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to go to the hospital. Right. I don't want to be, I don't want to be stuck in that state, And that's my whole point. I don't think you should do it alone. I think you should be around somebody that knows what they're doing. Like this stuff should be respected if you're going to do it. And I don't want people to think I'm promoting doing this stuff, because I'm not. But I can't make anybody happy. When I talk about it, I make a certain crowd happy. Then I piss off the people that don't like it, like the super spiritual people that think it's bad. And then if I say, yeah, you're right, these guys are psychonauts, then the psychonauts get mad. So I'm kind of in between. I'm not so sure. And this is one of those things where I really feel like you're going to have to experience this to know. There's no way around it.
Right.
We're not going to be able to read books. As much as these people try to portray what's really happening in these realms, there's no way of knowing. Like DMT is the one thing I think where you really have to face your fears. And I've noticed something about you, Lady Ann.
Yeah?
You're not scared of the dark, are you?
Well, I mean, I'm afraid of the unknown.
I mean that in every way, by the way.
Oh, yeah, no, sir. Mm-mm.
Dangerous. I'm very fond of you. Dangerous, confident, and brave.
There's a lot of beauty in the dark that people will see if they just faced it. So.
Really? What do you mean by that?
I don't know. The only... I always reference, the fact that the stars wouldn't be as beautiful as they are without the dark. I think the dark is very essential.
True. But do you mean like, when I think about the dark, I think about like boogeyman, demons, and, changelings. I don't want to face that kind of stuff.
Well, it's not just facing that kind of stuff. It's also facing your inner darkness, your inner turmoil, and your fears and everything. I mean, it's just as important as, doing all the love and light stuff and talking about fairies and elves.
I want to see a fairy.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
That
so
would be cool.
Let's go to the chat room real quick. Psychonauts are fun. Okay. I actually saw Mary in here, Ducina. She was going to type something and then poof, disappeared like the wind. She's not a chat room type of person. It only lasts a few minutes. Just ignore him. Thanks a lot, Don. I thought you were my buddy, right? That's what she said. If Joe freaks out, it only lasts a few minutes. Ignore him, right? He'll get over it. Lady Ann has a sweetheart sounding voice. I totally agree. She's probably going to film it, Joe. Don't film that. I'll never forgive you if you film me freaking out.
No. I promise. You have my word.
Let's see. How long was that girl like that? I don't know. I fast forwarded the video, but she was terrified, flipping around. It was like 5 minutes where she was screaming like that. Maybe it was salvia. That's not DMT. I don't know, man. The video says, what does the video say? DMT takes a rough turn. Woman has a crazy experience with 5-MeO DMT. So it was definitely DMT. We'll take this phone call just real fast, then we'll roll out here. 385 area code. You're on the air. Who are we speaking with?
Yeah, hey, this is Kevin. How are you?
Good, man. What's on your mind?
Good. Well, I've had quite a few DMT experiences.
Really?
One thing I want to point out really fast is 5-MeO is very different than what we call DMT. So DMT that Andrew was talking about is called N-dimethyltryptamine, and 5-MeO is a derivative of DMT. So the two experiences are not similar by any means. I just wanted to point that out for you. So the 5-MeO experiences can be a lot like the video that you were talking about with people screaming and flipping around and that type of thing. But DMT is not like that at all. N-dimethyltryptamine, with the guest tonight Andrew's talking about is more, you kind of just lay back and close your eyes and go for the ride, 10, 15 minutes.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah, I've met entities. In my experience, they're generally just light beings. Very, very cool. If they speak to you, it's kind of telepathically. I haven't got any sort of great messages or anything. They're just kind of around doing their thing. But yeah, it's a crazy experience for sure. It's very colorful, very geometric. But I do got to say, it can be difficult to get quote unquote to that breakthrough experience.
Yeah, well, I'm not looking for the breakthrough experience. Actually, I don't even think I want to get to that point. Speaking of which, I'm already over time here, but I do want to talk to you just for a second off the air, and then maybe you can call back in during, open lines and talk to us about this. But I do got to get out of here. I'm doing my buddy Ryan Gable a disservice. Hang on the line for me just for 1 second there. But you guys don't forget that the show is produced by The Fringe FM. Please don't copy it without written permission. I do want to thank Pacho for hooking this show up, Don for helping me out with it, Lady Ann, Jeremy, Eric, all of you guys for your support. And if you can support, you really could use it right now. And if you can't, just share and love and like the show. We'll see you guys tomorrow night with our New Moon special with Mary Ducina. Secret Teachings is coming up with Ryan.
On this program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised.